Yeah. Well, no. That's gasoline that he's forcing the child slain to drink. Like, shut up.
All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Screenplay Archaeology podcast. I'm your host, KiramidHead.
I'm Christian.
Coming back from the Halloween episode last year, and in fact, we are planning to have another one done for this year.
Yeah, we're not quite sure if it will be the Etchison Halloween 4 script. My rewrite is far from done of that script with my co-writer, who may or may not be joining us. And it'll either be, like I said, the Halloween 4 script, any of the scripts for Halloween 6 we might cover, or one that was written for Halloween 7, or a couple that were written for Halloween 9.
Yeah, 2 of the 3 that we know actually exist for Halloween 9. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, the third one, which was that weird prequel thing, has never come to light.
Yeah, that one has never. Another script collector of ours has written like a huge document of tracking all of these scripts that have been written, and there were more that were written for like Halloween 9 and the new movie that we just couldn't cover. Also, we don't even have much info on those. But yeah, there's plenty there to talk about.
Yeah, there's this lengthy Google Doc talking about all this stuff. So, when we get there, we'll get there. But honestly, I have no idea how many of those were actually official, because there's a lot of rumors chronicled in that thing, too.
Yeah, true.
So it'll take a bit of pruning and decision-making on what to talk about on our part. I completely forgot what word I was looking for there.
Yeah, no, and then some of it, if I remember correctly, it was like maybe a writer or director talking about what they would do.
Yeah, stuff like that.
I know that, like, because there's one from like Adam Green, and I know Adam Green has said that he's always been approached by a lot of those companies to like do a Friday the 13th, but like nothing comes through with them, but they always invite him to talk.
Yeah. But we'll save some of that information for whatever that episode ends up being.
Yeah, it's probably episode after your next one, probably.
Yeah, probably. Well, actually, you're right. It will be the one after the next one. I forgot my own schedule for a second there.
Yeah, it's fine.
Because I've been recording all these episodes ahead of time. I've never been like this ahead of the ball before, ever. But tonight we are discussing Return of the Thing, which is a 2-part TV movie script written for the Sci-Fi Channel as a sequel to John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah, this is, should we go through a quick overview of the series or discuss the writer quickly?
Let's do an overview of the series real quick.
Yeah, so we got the original novella, Who Goes There, which I believe I read in high school. And then now there's a new edition of it coming out.
Yeah, there's an extended edition called Frozen Hell, which is, I believe it was discovered recently in like a box of manuscripts that John W. Campbell had sent to like a university or something. And it was like the publication was kickstarted, and I want to say the ebook's been out for a while, but the physical copy's coming in October. I looked this up like last night.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, I can't really say anything about it just because it's been years since I've read through it. So
I've read it. I remember enough about it because it was relatively recently for me, but it is. The Carpenter film is actually fairly close to it. Like, the dog scene is similar enough. The blood test scene is almost right from it. The main difference is that there's just a lot more characters in it.
Yeah, that's because I remember that in like the one comic book adaptation of Who Goes There that was made before John Carpenter's movie.
And also, there's like this weird thing where somehow, even though they're in Antarctica, they're like raising cattle.
Yeah.
And there's like this whole thing where they have to go through the cattle and find out which ones are things. And I'm like, how are you raising cattle at the South Pole? Come on now.
Yeah, the movie makes way more sense with it being, dogs and whatnot. But then we over the years, there have been a few radio drama adaptations. I believe I might have listened to one of the 2 that are known. There was one that was recorded for BBC Radio 4 for their Chiller series. Yes, I'm reading this all off of Wikipedia right now.
I mean, that's basically the research on this show.
Yeah, and then there was this, I guess, a resurrection of the show Suspense, but one done in fairly recently in 2013, and then the one that was done during the height of old time radio, or rather, it's already in the decline of old time radio. If you look at its timeline now, in 1958, there was one for Exploring Tomorrow, and it was titled The Escape or something like that. And it's apparently hosted by John W. Campbell Jr., but no recordings of this have been found.
Sadly, that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, the most controversial radio recording that I know of would be like an adaptation that was done for like War of the Worlds a decade after Orson Welles, and it was done in this Central America country. For like the most popular radio station there, and they pissed so many people off that they burned down the radio station that night.
Wow.
Yeah, and apparently, like people, like husbands at the local churches were confessing to their wives that they had been cheating on them, thinking that they're about to die from a UFO.
That's way more interesting than the actual Orson Welles controversy.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't bring that up earlier, but yeah, no. But yeah, the actual studio was like burned down, so like any recording that they would have made that day is lost to time.
Yeah, that's a shame. I would love to hear it.
Yeah, and then because I was at a thing with NPR back in 2007 where they had an entire live show about all the various recordings of War of the Worlds. But then getting into the films, we have the 1951 Thing from Another World,
which I just rewatched yesterday.
It's been years since I've watched it, but it's still a good movie. Yeah,
I actually saw that first. I rented it on VHS tape when I was very small.
Yeah, same. I saw it first.
One thing I had forgotten from it was that the spaceship in that crashes like literally like 24 hours before the story begins.
And obviously at the time they didn't go with the story itself being about, a shape-shifting alien that can assimilate life forms. They instead made it a vegetable monster. Yeah,
and apparently Howard Hawks did want to do something with the assimilation, but he was told he couldn't.
Which is a shame, because they could have still done a fairly low-key assimilation thing if they wanted to. I mean, If you look at like Invasion of the Body Snatchers around the same time, it didn't need to be like, if they were worried about like special effects and whatnot, I don't think they had anything to worry about at the time, even with special effects. So it must have just been an RKO decision.
Yeah, probably. And from what I understand, that movie is it's a bit of a poltergeist situation where the credited director didn't necessarily direct everything.
Yeah, Christian Nyby.
Yeah.
And then years later, when Universal acquired RKO movies to remake, one of them being Cat People, the Thing was another one that they had wanted to do, and they wanted to put a lot of effort into it. And there was a take that had been written by Kim Henkel and Toby Hooper.
Interesting.
Yeah, they did. They talked about it on the documentary, if I remember correctly. That script has never surfaced, but I do remember us having like some various treatments for an adaptation of Who Goes There around that time. So they must have just been going to various writers.
I don't know. See Kim Henkel involved. I'm just getting flashbacks to Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation.
Yeah, that. Yeah, no. What actor would they have gotten to then abuse their image with at the time? Exploit what they did with Matthew McConaughey in that movie.
Yeah, and I was actually reading during this phase before Carpenter got involved. There was a treatment written for it.
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning.
There was another treatment written by someone else. I can't remember his name, but it was apparently it was more low key and Body Snatchers like.
Which makes sense, but yeah. Carpenter was who they ended up going with. And originally he had wanted to cast more of his regular actors in the roles. If you listen to Stuart Cohen's audio commentary.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he wanted Tom Atkins to play MacReady, and he wanted Donald Pleasance and Charles Cyphers in the film, but they encouraged him to go with other actors.
Tom Atkins as MacReady might have been too awesome.
I don't think we could handle that in this timeline.
There was nobody, and also there would have been nobody on the set for him to fuck, so.
Well, there is the inflatable doll that got deleted from the final cut.
I forgot about that. Probably a good thing it got deleted.
Yeah.
And also, wasn't there a thing in one of the early drafts? There was supposed to be a female member of the expedition.
There might have been. I only have the second draft of Burt Lancaster's script and a shooting script that's like missing 30 pages.
Okay, because I think I've read something that they had something planned, but then there was like a scheduling issue, and so they recast it.
That's from the way they've always talked about it. It sounded like their intention was to do an all-male cast to begin with, at least when John Carpenter was brought on board.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they always. I know, like they talked about it being unique. You know, just the fact that you never have a monogender movie often enough, so to heighten the theme of the film.
I mean, even as boys' own as the original Thing movie is, I mean, there's still 2 women in there.
Yeah, and but John Carpenter's The Thing is probably my favorite movie of all time.
It is up there.
Yeah, for me, it's always hard to say what my favorite is, but for me, it's always been consistently like at the top for me. And right next to John Carpenter's Halloween, it's probably the movie that I own like the most copies of.
I don't own quite that. I've owned a VHS tape, I owned a DVD, and now I have a Blu-ray of it. Halloween, yeah, I've owned shitloads of copies of Halloween. I own
7 copies.
I haven't owned quite that many. I've owned 2 DVDs and 2 Blu-rays, I think.
Yeah, no, well, with the thing, for Halloween, I have like an old VHS, and then that 4K re-release they did recently, a 35th anniversary edition booklet, and then the box set. And keep in mind, like the box set comes with like 3 copies, and the 4K remaster also comes with the 2007 Blu-ray. So, yeah, quite a lot there. But with the thing, I have the collector's edition DVD. I have that shitty Blu-ray, and that was the first one that I got. And then I immediately, like a year later, as soon as I could, like I got the older DVD. And then got the Shout Factory Blu-ray, and then I now have the Shout Factory Steelbook, which comes with the 4K remaster that was done for the Arrow Video release in the UK.
Yeah, I have the Shout Factory Blu-ray, and I know there was a lot of complaining when it came out that the colors look different, but my eyes must just be fucked up or something, because anytime someone starts complaining about that, I literally cannot see it. Yeah,
it's not noticeable for me, but but I still got the 4K remaster just to assure myself that I'm getting the best.
Like, I know, for example, when Criterion, when they put out Thief, everyone was saying, oh, they completely blued out the entire movie, and I'm looking at the movie and looking at the screenshots on the laptop, and I'm like, did I get just a different version of the movie?
Yeah. I mean, I can notice it, though, like with Tim Burton's Batman, that new 4K re-release they did.
I heard they smoothed the image out a lot or something like that.
Yeah, everything's aqua blue, and all the guns sound like they're from brand new guns. It's pointless, but yeah.
Yeah,
but anyway, at the time, the thing obviously was not a success. Kind of like, I mean, probably the biggest upsets of John Carpenter's career would be The Thing and Big Trouble in Little China not finding their audience at the time.
Yeah, The Thing bombing actually killed another project. It killed his version of Firestarter.
Yeah, they basically, Universal then like bought him out after that. And he apparently like used that money to buy a boat.
Good on him.
Yeah, that's what Bill Phillips says anyway.
It's the Michael Caine thing of, I haven't seen Jaws the Revenge, but I've seen the house it built.
Yeah, except Michael Caine still had to do Jaws the Revenge.
Yeah, true.
But it holds up years later, and it's only gotten stronger. And I think with most of Carpenter's films, like they just get stronger with audiences over time. But it's funny to watch, like in Stranger Things, like you already have characters who like love the movie a year later. And it's also the new Coke of remakes. Let's not forget that. Well, anyway, with The Thing, even though it was not a success at the time, there were various attempts at sequels in other media with comic books.
Yeah, that's true. And also, let's not forget, it's sort of part of a trilogy.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But there was then there was a video game. Unfortunately, I've never played the video game, but from what I can tell, it's still not a bad game from what I can tell. It's just maybe not the most ageless of games.
Yeah, I mean, copies of it are available for pretty cheap on Amazon, so I might buy that and stream it just for the hell of it.
Mm-hmm. And I did try downloading a PC copy of it once, but it was like with Russian text.
Ooh.
And I'm like, unless I get the actual English copy, I'm shit here. But and then like I guess Carpenter can't decide which one is canon.
Yeah, because at one point Carpenter said that if he did end up making a sequel, it would be basically just the first comic series.
Mm-hmm.
And then at another point he said, the game is the sequel.
Yeah, and then there was an unproduced sequel to the game, which apparently concept art for that ended up in the 2011 prequel, which let's get into that quickly.
I've never actually seen it, and I don't think I really want to.
Yeah, I've never have been able to commit to sitting down and watching it.
The one detail I know about the movie is that I know all about how they replaced the special effects, and the one weird detail I know is how they apparently painted over one with Tetris blocks.
Yeah, from what I remember, Ronald D. Moore wrote the first script for it, but then ended up going uncredited for it, if I remember correctly. There were talks from having McCready's brother be a character, and I'm like, what? I'm trying to remember all that I remember about it, but I know people swear up and down that it's sort of like the Snyder Cut. I guess if I just saw the practical effects, I would love the movie. I'm sorry, the script wise, I don't think I could. And there was a good analysis video by Rob Ager of Collative Learning where he analyzed how even in these shots of practical effects that they have on set, they sort of don't adhere to the thing being very slimy, and so it'd be like a very dry monster. And I'm sorry, I just can't get behind the 2011 prequel.
And other thing, I mean, I saw like about 30 seconds of footage from it in SF Debris' review of the original, where he shows the two-headed monster, and it's like running around on all fours and screeching like a velociraptor. What the fuck? Yeah, no, I tried watching it on an on-demand service recently, and the first scene of it is the Norwegians out exploring in the field with a snowmobile or something, and the ground beneath them breaks and they fall in, and they get stuck, and then they see that the UFO is like below them, and it just looks so fake. I could not get into it. And apparently, and I could have gone my whole life without knowing this, but apparently one half of that two-headed thing from the original is not Jim Carrey from the Dumb and Dumber prequel. Okay. I did not need to know that. Yeah. But more recently, there have been some board games that I do want to play at some point, but that's the other spin-off we're dealing with here. Oh, okay. I didn't actually know that. Yeah, there's one that's called The Thing and another one that's called Who Goes There. And then there's also a card game. I'm just looking up here, like, things that fans have come up with for over the years. But one of them we got from my cousin, and I think that was Infection at Outpost 31. You see, this sounds like something you could do kind of an interesting multiplayer game of, finding out who's the thing. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of in Friday the 13th, in Jason Lives, where like one of the characters tries coming up with a card game for Jason. Oh, geez. But yeah, I think that covers it, doesn't it? Yeah, in terms of the other material for the series, but the one that almost got produced, I mean, I'm trying to remember if there were ever any attempts by John Carpenter to produce a sequel in the 2000s, and there was like something where they were discussing about how they would make, like they would use Frostbite as an explanation for why Kurt Russell and Keith David's characters would look older. That's weird. Yeah, I don't remember if any of that is true or whatnot, but hey, I read it somewhere once. But the one that did get close was this two-part unproduced script for the Sci-Fi Channel. Half of it is called Return of the Thing, the other half is just called The Thing. And the first part's called Part 1, and then the second part's called Night 2. So some shit changed somewhere in there. So yeah, this was basically written as part of like the sort of like the glory days of the Sci-Fi Channel, really, back in like the early mid 2000s, when they had a lot of success with like, taking over Stargate from Showtime, and they expanded the whole Stargate franchise a lot with multiple spin-off shows and stuff like that, and they were doing tons of like prestige miniseries, some of which were good. Dune and Children of Dune. Yeah, Dune, Children of Dune, Firestarter Rekindled, they did It was called Legend of Earthsea in its televised production, but on DVD it was just called Earthsea, which was not good, but it was at least ambitious. So yeah, there was a lot of effort getting put into stuff around this time, and this is before they went into that descent in the late 2000s and they changed the logo.
This is I mean, honestly, the descent for me, if you look back at it, starts in 2005 when they get obsessed with guys running around in houses thinking that they're seeing a ghost.
Yeah, that happened around this time as well.
Yeah, same year. But I mean, at the time, they still had good programming, like with Stargate Atlantis and Battlestar Galactica, which did start out as like a miniseries test run.
Yeah, that is true.
And so that makes me question what they would have done for a follow-up with this, is if they would follow it up with another miniseries or an actual TV show.
Well, we'll talk about that when we get to the end.
Because
the possibilities are a little slim.
Of what they could do. Yeah. But I mean, it kind of reminds me of the War of the Worlds TV series. Getting back to that, but like the sequel to the 53 movie is the 80s series, where they're now body jumpers or body snatchers.
No, I forgot that was a thing until you mentioned it.
It's actually good from like what I've seen of it. I actually like it.
Yeah, I've seen a handful of clips. It didn't look that bad.
Yeah. But anyway, the script was written by a former assistant to Frank Darabont, who may or may not have been set to executive produce this show.
He was producing it, but we don't know if he was directing it or not.
Yeah, so the writer is he's going by a bunch of names. He needs to simplify this. David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick.
Sometimes he's David Leslie Johnson. Sometimes he's David Leslie Johnson -McGoldrick.
Yeah, it's whatever he wants to use, I guess. He's name fluid.
Yeah, he was an assistant. From what I've read, he was an assistant of Frank Darabont, and they actually met because Shawshank Redemption filmed in his hometown.
Okay. But yeah, he's worked on a bunch of episodes of The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead, even after Frank Darabont's departure.
In fact, most of the episodes he wrote were after I stopped watching, so I can't speak to any of those.
Neither can I, but he wrote 2 episodes of Frank Darabont's series they tried doing after Walking Dead, Mob City.
Which I've heard is good, but it didn't last.
Oh yeah, it was already canceled, I think, when they started airing it. They were basically airing it to burn it off.
Oh, it got Swamp Thinged.
Yeah, kind of. And then I'm trying to see what else here. The 2 other movies they had produced around this time was Orphan and Red Riding Hood.
I've heard good things about Orphan. I've heard nothing good about Red Riding Hood.
I've heard his script for it was better or something like that. I don't remember. I think they were posted on our site a long time ago, and I'm trying to remember if I downloaded them or not. And then Orphan, take what you will with that twist.
I've never actually seen it, but I've heard it's interesting at the very least.
Yeah, I can't say whether or not I like it or hate it. I honestly don't know. And then he co-wrote Wrath of the Titans,
which wasn't as bad as it could have been.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if he handled the final drafts of that or what.
I don't actually know, because I think the only drafts that are out there are like those of, I've never actually seen them, so, because they're in the hands of like collectors, I think, but like I want to say that like everybody's name is on those drafts, so. Okay.
And then more recently he started hanging out with James Wan because he co-wrote The Conjuring 2. He did like the final rewrite on that, and then same with Aquaman.
And he's supposed to be writing Aquaman 2 himself.
Yeah, same with The Conjuring 3. I'm just looking here at what he's attached to.
All I have to say is that Conjuring 3, so not looking forward to that since James Wan's not doing it. Yeah, and seeing the characters in Annabelle Goes Home from the trailer, I'm like, well, why isn't this called Conjuring 3 or something? I know it's still sort of a prequel, but whatever. I guess titling. I feel like the Conjuring universe's days are numbered right now. Outside of that, he wrote a Doc Savage script for Frank Darabont. Yeah, that was early in his career. Yeah, Darabont was supposed to direct, or this was around 2000, and Schwarzenegger was supposed to play Doc Savage. I've actually read that, and it was actually a pretty good action-adventure script. It wasn't perfect exactly, but it was not bad. Yeah, and then he also has a Dungeons and Dragons script, which is good. It could use a little bit of work, but it's called Chainmail, aka Dungeons and Dragons: The Hand of Chaos. Okay. And then he's also attached to
a new Invasion of the Body Snatchers adaptation, and a new Nightmare on Elm Street reboot.
Here's my thing with Body Snatchers. I mean, haven't we kind of milked that concept about as far as we can?
Well, I mean, the original is about small-town paranoia of communists. The 70s one is commentary on pop psychiatry. The Abel Ferrara one is a commentary on military culture. And then 2007 one's like fear of like the viruses and flu, if I remember correctly.
I've not seen the latter two.
Yeah, I'm assuming whatever they do with this new one, it would probably be about commentary on like political culture.
Yeah, assuming so. Although the problem with the 2007 version is that I have the actual script for it, but I've never read it. But my understanding is that it was heavily rewritten by the Wachowskis.
Okay.
They basically they went uncredited, and they basically completely rewrote the third act for reshoots, and James McTeague directed the new third act.
Okay, so yeah, that movie sounds like a Frankenstein of a movie.
Yeah, I found that out because I was researching Kajanik stuff for that It episode.
Oh, did he write that movie?
Yeah, he wrote Invasion.
Oh, okay, I completely forgot about that. I guess I can't blame him then for the final product. I don't know.
No, you can't. I mean, I'd have to read it, but apparently the entire third act was completely gutted and redone.
Okay. To make it happier, I guess, like the original and the novella.
I guess because what do I think? Because I think it was like the test audiences absolutely hated the original ending.
It does not surprise me, but yeah.
But I don't actually know what his original ending was, so I can't speak to that.
Okay. Well, anyway, we're still on the topic of 50s sci-fi here with that, so we're not going off on a tangent, so don't blame us.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff to talk about. Invasion might actually have to be an episode down the line just to see what's different. Yeah,
well, I remember in the recent episode of Treehouse of Horror, like they did a parody of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and like they're about to simulate comic book guy, and he goes, "Oh, this is such a ripoff of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is really a ripoff of the thing." And but yes, getting to this two-part script, let's dive in, shall we?
All right, I'll take over, I guess. Okay, part one the first script is called Return of the Thing, Part 1, Exposure, which I was just about to make an indecent exposure joke, but I won't.
Yeah. I guess we should also comment, you can find concept art for this miniseries online, and we don't know why it got canceled.
Yeah, we have no idea why it got canceled. Apparently the concept art you can find apparently it's just general thing concept art from what I've read. It doesn't actually correspond to the script in any way.
Okay. That's weird. So then I must be wrong about that. But regardless, most likely this was canceled due to a regime change at Sci-Fi. If they were indeed going crazy with Ghost Hunters, this is when they really started to change their programming, from what I remember. Well, so it could have been canceled for that. They stopped doing miniseries at this point.
Yeah, well, the miniseries, they stopped getting made because they weren't doing as well.
Yeah, so that it might have just gotten canceled due to that alone, I think.
That's a shame. Because I do have to say now, before we are bashing Sci-Fi Channel, but they actually, from what I understand, they have been getting a lot better in recent years.
They have been, but then they've been canceling some of their stuff that's actually considered good. So I have no idea. They're just a mixed bag of a channel. But I shouldn't really say too much because I want to get a job on their Night Gallery revival.
Oh, that would be amazing. But
yeah, that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah. They're canceling everything. They're Netflixing the shit out of their content.
Huluing it as well. Well, anyway, so yes, part 1, Exposure. These are also dated months apart. I'm trying to remember if you mentioned that yet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Both. I think that's probably more important to mention when we get to part 2.
So we open up with the ending of the first film with the title card.
I should mention this one is dated February 11th, 2005, and it's a first draft.
But yeah. Anyway, we begin with the ending of the first film and with the original title card, and then the first new bit occurs when Dr. Loomis runs out and saying, "You don't know what death is."
That would be amazing if that happened. The Carpenter cinematic universe. It starts with the ending of the first movie with McCready and Childs sharing a last drink.
Mm-hmm. And then we cut to 6 months later.
Yeah, 6 months later, and let me get to my notes. Yeah, it cuts to 6 months later, and there's a Soviet team led by a Dr. Lukyanov and his wife and colleague Alina, and they discover the frozen corpses of MacReady and Childs, who are, frozen solid and half buried in snow.
In a Mexican standoff.
Yeah. Childs is aiming a flamethrower at MacReady. MacReady's got his gun, and I'm like, well, we know who's winning that fight if one's a thing.
Yeah.
And so,
and they play chess in their head as well.
Yeah, presumably cheating bitch.
We're referencing the husband and wife team here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're like playing chess with each other and stuff like that, and they eventually, they helicopter out to the crater with the crashed spaceship inside. And I initially thought, wait a minute, shouldn't that be further away? But that gets explained later. So
yeah, and I guess they don't care about the Norwegian base as much.
Yeah, they don't. They mentioned it later, but they don't show it.
Yeah, and thankfully, no references to any future prequel or anything.
Oh, thank God! No, they don't find Ramona Flowers' frozen corpse in the middle of nowhere.
I was an important character somehow.
But no, they rappel down into the ship, and the scene it fades to black and shows the original title card
with Return of the Thing added to it.
And who knows if that was stuck, considering the two drafts are titled differently.
Yeah, hopefully they would have kept the title just for consistency's sake. But I guess like the Thing and Halloween, for some reason, people want to do follow-ups to John Carpenter movies and not change the title.
Yeah, it would be really funny if both this and the prequel got made, so we have 3 distinct properties in the same continuity, just called The Thing.
Yeah, and then the next one would be The Thing Kills, immediately followed by The Thing Ends.
And I mean, hey, at least you're not the Fog remake, I guess.
Yeah, there's that.
Which, just as a slight tangent, is one of the only movies I ever refused to see just purely based on the poster.
I'm trying to remember if I think Carpenter still defends that movie or something.
Does he?
There's some article about it, about like the Fog versus The Thing.
I'm like, okay, dude, I hate to break it to you, but both Halloween remakes which you dissed are better than that movie, probably.
Yeah.
But so it cuts to 23 years later, 2005, and then Lukyanov is meeting with these Russian bureaucrats, and we find out that this is all spread out over a few scenes, so I kind of condensed some of the exposition in my notes, but basically it's this Chechen dissident named Vitsenko who broke into this lab and stole something important, which obviously it's The Thing, even though they're not saying it yet.
Yeah, it's been labeled as smallpox.
Yeah, he's hopped on a plane to L.A., and Lukyanov is arguing, the Americans should be told what they're dealing with, but, stick to the smallpox cover story we've provided for you, and they escort him to an airport.
Yep, and at the same time, overseas, we have 2 men who are going to be in a power play later on through the Department of Homeland Security. Roger Pritchard and Avery. I'm trying to remember that character's Peter Avery.
Peter Avery, yeah. Peter Avery is the secretary, and Pritchard is the undersecretary. And if I'm remembering right, they're named after characters from Starman.
Okay.
Let me check that. Let me check that real quick. Continue.
Yeah. So they're doing the Halloween Asylum naming scheme here.
Not that
sorry. But for casting, I could see Ted Raimi playing Pritchard, and for Peter Avery, I see the dad from Halloween 6, the asshole dad from Halloween 6.
Except Avery ends up being the reasonable one.
Yeah, but do you agree with that casting?
Yes, I could see that.
Yeah, Ted Raimi and Bradford English.
Of course, I always just picture Ted Raimi in his role from The Grudge, just running into the jawless chick.
So anyway, here.
Okay, no, actually, I was wrong about that. So
okay. Oh, and the Halloween 3D method of naming as well, where like they were naming after other Carpenter characters.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So yes, they also discuss Ivan, and then they get in contact with Anne Blackburn from the CDC.
And they talk about her via video phone because Skype doesn't exist yet.
Cisco. Man, I'm so awash in a knowledge of like useless mid-2000s technology that went defunct pretty quickly.
The Zune. I hear it holds 300 songs.
And you can also share it with your friends. stand up next to them with their Zune, which they are definitely also going to have, and you can transfer songs.
Yeah, but they consult with Blackburn about the situation, and Avery is called by the president, who wants his recommendation for a course of action. Now, the president is in several scenes of this, but always as a voice, and even when they show him, he's always in shadow.
I'm trying to think who I envision. Why the fuck am I for Powers Booth as the president?
Yes, because, that makes a lot of sense, because I just remember his character in The Avengers is always on like a video phone and always in shadow.
Until you get to the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV series.
And Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Or was he in Winter Soldier? I can't remember.
He might have been, but I mean, he gets exposed regardless as a Hydra agent if you count Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in continuity.
I only saw the first season, so.
I just for my own timing's sake, I had to drop it during season 3 just because to maintain my own schedule.
I got you on that one. But no, it's interesting that it's almost like they're afraid of being seen like they're going to be spoofing Bush or something like that.
Yeah, I've always wondered like how you handle these types of president characters at the time.
Because I mean, the first Transformers movie just flat out throws a Bush joke in there.
Well, getting back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they have Bill Sadler as the president, but then in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV series, which I guess we're supposed to disregard as being in canon with the movies now, in season 1 they make a reference to Obama. So
yeah, and in they do it. There's an Obama reference in one of the Iron Man movies as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think it's an Iron Man 2.
That would make sense. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, basically, they've gotten the cover story about, Vitsenko smuggling the smallpox. And so Avery decides he'd rather force a landing to better control any possible outbreak, and he wants the plane to set down. And it's being held in a holding pattern over New Mexico by the Air Force, and he wants them to set down at Cannon Air Force Base.
Run by Sergeants Golan and Globus.
A dog?
And so they had...
dog?
Yeah, I am. My Adderall has worn off, so I'm just thinking up random thoughts here as we go along. But yeah, so the thing imitating Ivan starts to see that they are in a holding pattern and basically spazzes out.
Right as they receive the orders to land, too, he collapses in the aisle, and it looks like he's having a heart attack. And so they bring in the defibrillator. And then it cuts to the cockpit where the pilots hear screaming and something starts banging on the cockpit door.
Yeah, and then when DHS starts to hear commotion on the plane, they then order the fighter jets to then shoot down the airplane.
But it falls out
over
of the air.
Smallpox?
Yeah, the disease we basically eradicated.
Yeah, I know. I mean, granted, I think the Russians had it labeled as like weaponized smallpox, so not to use it. So I guess the idea is that's more dangerous than regular smallpox under their assumption.
Yeah, I guess. But
yeah, over smallpox, yeah.
Yeah, but before they can fire a missile, the plane just falls out of the sky and crashes.
Yeah, I love this opening here.
Yeah, it's actually really cool.
And the script throughout does a lot of visual homages to John Carpenter's film, and I think even one homage to the 1951 movie, but they're all pretty subtle and well done overall.
There's actually 2, but I can only specifically remember the one from the 51 movie.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
Yeah. They're both in part 2.
Yeah, and trying to remember here, in my notes, I just kept writing down callback, callback, callback.
But I wasn't thinking, oh, fuck you. Oh, fuck you.
Yeah, I wasn't mad by these callbacks because they all seemed subtle.
Like, they all seemed like they would make sense.
Mm-hmm. And so anyway, when the plane crashes near a Navajo Indian's little ranch that he has, Frank Little Bear.
And every time I read Little Bear in the script, I saw the cartoon Little Bear, which I used to watch as a little kid.
Okay. At the same time, Ivan is having to argue with his handler from the Russian government. Sorry, we're just going through our notes, people. This is so...
Yeah, Lukanov, well, before we get there, Little Bear, he watches the plane as it crashes into the desert, and this is where we see the coyote approach the wreckage.
Another homage here.
Yeah, where it's grabbed by the thing. It's in the form of a barely visible fleshy mass, but it sprouts that the flower thing out of its mouth. This seems to suggest that maybe this is like that the flower is like an inbuilt part of it somehow, because it comes back a few times. And it sprays the animal with milky liquid, but let's be honest, it's thing jizz. before pulling it in.
Remember, it's done in it's done in Carpenter's movie as well.
Yeah, it sprays the one dog to keep it from chewing out of the kennel.
Mm-hmm.
And before it pulls it in and takes its shape, which Little Bear is witnessing it from a nearby ridge.
Yeah.
And this is where we cut back to Lukanov, who's at the airport. He gets met by this secret agent named Petrovsky, who has been put in charge of the operation, who's there to make sure the cover story is maintained and all that.
Mm-hmm. Then at the CDC they discuss having to set up a quarantine zone for the smallpox
and get the mobile lab down there.
Yep, and she discusses this with Pritchard and Avery, and then Pritchard and Avery have a bit of a power play again here.
Yeah, where Avery orders Pritchard out there to oversee the operation, but Pritchard thinks this is him trying to get him away so he can have FaceTime with the president.
Mm-hmm. And then back at Little Bear's ranch, he then grabs supplies and weapons to go out and chase the thing, the coyote thing.
Yeah, so that's a running thread throughout this thing, Little Bear hunting the coyote thing.
Yep, with his beliefs about being a skinwalker. We'll get to that later. He passes by, we're introduced to some town people here, the sheriff and Dale Rafferty.
Yeah, and Rafferty, because we don't know his first name yet.
Yep. Oh, and
we get introduced to a lot of townsfolk in this next sequence, and I condensed it a lot in my notes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, most of these townspeople are not going to be that important. They'll be important at certain points, but they're not Yuri. They're not the doctors. They're not the people in charge of the operation. So they're more background than the scientists in the script.
They're more fodder for the paranoia, for more people for the things to hide as.
Yeah, and so anyway, basically they have to assemble a first response team. And at the same time, a mother is dropping off her son with her sister to watch while the sister's husband goes out with the response team.
Yeah, Sarah drops off Michael with her sister, who says, okay, I'm going to send him across the way to Paulette's place, and he can play with her daughter.
Mm-hmm. And the town, by the way, is Christmas, New Mexico. I guess they're the cousins of the people who founded Valentine's Bluffs.
It's set in Christmas. We should have gotten Shane Black to write this. The thing would have tried to assimilate autism.
Fuck that movie. Thinking that it would be like an advantageous weapon, but really all you have to do is just show it a picture of Christian Weston Chandler, and then it would go, okay, this isn't going to help me. Or Christine.
So all this stuff is getting put together, and there's a bunch of firefighters. Samantha's husband Bob is one, and then there's Jamie, there's Billy, who's the young guy, and there's Harold, who apparently always begs out of actual jobs, saying he has a back problem, which I thought that would actually be more important than it was, but it isn't.
Yeah, well, we'll get to Harold later in the script.
Way later, because it's basically just there to set up who he is. And
then, let's see here, so they're at the firehouse and they're at the crash site. And while they're at the crash site, the military base nearby is set up for containment. Yeah, Pritchard arrives on the scene, basically. Talking to Weber. Who's part of like the Epidemic Intelligence Services.
Yeah, I was trying to. I wrote down the abbreviation, but I forgot what it actually stood for.
I literally have it here on the page right now.
Yeah, and while that's going on, the first responders, they find a badly burned survivor in the wreckage, and they're trying to figure out what to do with him when a Black Hawk helicopter flies in overhead.
Another nice reveal here.
Yeah, and the coyote thing is actually watching them and going like, huh.
Yeah, it's studying them, and then and basically the military is starting to take over the town. They take over the communication that the sheriff is trying to have with one of his dispatch. So yeah, it's a nice little reveal here of the operation being taken away from them. And then
Pritchard arrives and he sets up the mobile lab and quarantines the sheriff and the firefighters.
Yeah, and they store the burned thing and what else? And survivor.
They don't find the burned thing yet, I don't think.
Oh, sorry. I'm getting ahead.
Yeah, they don't find it yet. And so, yeah, this is where we cut to the CDC headquarters, where Blackburn, who thought something sounded suspicious about when she was told Lukianoff was going to be the expert, she asked for a file on him, and she reads it, and she immediately calls up Avery via her not Skype video phone, and she says, hey, he used to work for the Soviets on developing biological weapons, and he just mysteriously disappeared in 1984. And so this is where they kind of start figuring that the smallpox is a cover story, but they don't know what for yet.
Yeah, and then meanwhile, Petrovsky sets up a call with, or they still discuss, him and Lukianoff discuss the stuff still on the plane.
Around this is also when we get introduced to Brenner, the U.S. Marshal transporting the prisoner Gaines, and he's passing through the town.
Trust us, folks, this makes more sense when you read it. We're doing
the thing with this is that I took detailed notes trying to get down everything in order. The problem is that, especially in this first part, there's a lot of jumping back and forth. Yeah,
my notes started out fairly detailed, and then as I was rereading this script, which this was also the first script I ever read like 6 years ago, so I had a lot of remembering to do.
I can't remember if the first script I ever read was Resident Evil or Superman Lives.
But yeah, there was a lot of remembering to do on my part, but basically, as I chugged along today, my notes just got less and less detailed.
Yeah, so maybe we should rely on my notes for the moment.
Yeah,
because I've been studiously taking these down for the last few days.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, so that's when we see Blackburn and Avery. They're communicating with Petrovsky and Lukianoff via a webcam, and Blackburn lets on that she knows the smallpox story is bullshit, and Avery tells him that the plane crashed, and then Petrovsky yanks out the cables, prematurely ending the call.
Because they told him that there were no survivors. They didn't believe there were any survivors, and so Petrovsky thinks that everything has been destroyed, thus they don't have to do anything.
Yeah, and he doesn't believe Lukianoff when he says that even a single cell is dangerous, and he goes, hey, pilot, turn this thing around.
Yeah, and when talking to the Americans, he has stereotypical Russian English. Yeah, sorry.
And so Pritchard and Weber, they confirm that Hayes and the firefighters aren't infected with smallpox. And like there's a thing where he goes like, oh, keep them in quarantine just a little while longer just to be an asshole, which is a joke which was used in one of the Fantastic Four scripts.
Okay.
And we see the coyote thing. It snatches a jackrabbit in the desert, not far from town. And Pritchard and Weber, they then contact General Wise, who's, this is where they start taking over communications and setting up the quarantine zone. And Brenner runs into the quarantine barrier, and he has the soldier on guard duty call his superior to see if they'll let him through.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sarah, who is a waitress who's at the Atomic Bar and Grill, argues with her boss Luis, and it's basically because he's like trying to exploit the situation for business.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when we get introduced to Paulette Milligan and her daughter Ginny, where Michael is staying at. And we learn that Paulette can't call anybody long distance, and Ginny comes in asking for carrots, and we then see that Michael is playing with the jackrabbit thing in the backyard, and that is an act break right there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, could you imagine watching this on TV and it smashes to a commercial there?
Yeah. Well, the only other Carpenter-related thing that's TV movie that I watched recently is Silent Predators.
I've not seen that.
Yeah, because he wrote a script for it back in the 70s when it was called Fangs.
I have Fangs.
Yeah, we might cover that in the future.
Yeah, is that the one about it's like people getting attacked by snakes?
Yeah, rattlesnakes. And in the final film, it's the gimmick is there are a certain breed of rattlesnakes that when they bite you, it kills you instantly.
Yeah, as far as his TV work goes, I've seen Elvis, and I've seen Someone's Watching Me. Yeah,
well, this one was basically just something that he had involvement with like 20 years prior. But when they first started doing the blackout thing, I'm like, wait, what? Oh yeah, TV movie.
And okay, so we come back to the next act, and Michael's about to feed the jackrabbit thing when Samantha calls him over to her place, which is in the back of the Mighty Mart where she works, for lunch. And Ginny feeds the rabbit, and she ends up surrounded by a large group of identical jackrabbit things, so she's fucked.
Yeah, creepy image.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good imagery in this, really good suspense.
Yeah, and then meanwhile, Lukianoff gets an upper hand over Petrovsky by taking out a gun on the plane and shooting him dead between the eyes, sort of like Clark in the original.
Yeah, and he hijacks the plane and forces them to head to the U.S. again.
Yeah, and so a nice character turn for him. And then he gets. Meanwhile, Avery is having to is on TV at the moment, and basically being fed wrong information by Pritchard.
And also during this bit, Michael is, he's eating lunch, and this is where we learn that he's not fond of his mother's boyfriend, Dale.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go back to the Atomic Cafe, or whatever we want to call it, because saying bar and grill every time is going to take too much time. But Luis, he sees a hole in the chicken wire around the chicken coop, and he's because he's very specific about how he has hens lay his own eggs in the backyard.
They're chicken abortions, and they're fucking gross. They're not chicken abortions. Now go get your brother Michael.
Michael, stop jerking off in there.
I'm not listening.
But no, this guy is seriously proud of the fact that he fucking hatches his own eggs in the back of the store.
I would have to question some of the health regulations on that, but okay.
He's like, you don't get eggs fresher than that. And he sees the...
you don't get salmonella fresher than that.
And he sees the coyote thing's paw prints, and he sees it run off, but he fires a shotgun and misses. And so we go back to the roadblock, and the soldier tells Brenner that he'll have to stay in the town until the quarantine is lifted. And back at the crash site, this is when the team uncovers a charred corpse with 3 distinct heads, so it's a thing. And then we go back to the bar and grill. Luis shows Little Bear the hole in the chicken wire, but they find that none of the hens have been killed, so everything seems to be okay. And this is when Little Bear starts talking about the coyote being a skinwalker and a trickster, and he says, hey, Luis, keep your eyes open.
And Luis is dubiously okay.
And so this is Avery calls up Pritchard, and he's angry about what happened on the conference. And this is where Pritchard fires back, going like, oh, you're trying to sacrifice me as a scapegoat for this problem. He's like, I'm not going to cooperate with you anymore. And then Avery receives a video call right after this from Lukhanov explaining about the hijacking and how the Russian government lied about the smallpox. He offers to help, but first demands he be given protection when he lands, ending the call.
Yep, and then... I'm jumping ahead here, too. There's really not much to comment here on at the moment, but...
the autopsy is next.
Yes, the Thing autopsy. They better hope that they have a guy who used to grow up on a ranch doing this autopsy.
Yeah. the autopsy, the way it's described here, reminded me of Blade 2.
Yeah. Oh, and I gotta say, considering the Frank Darabont connection, I'm getting some serious vibes of like the Thing 88 movie they did with Chuck Russell.
Oh, the Blob? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's also just as merciless in killing off children.
Oh yes, we'll get to that.
We already got to that.
Oh yeah, we already implied it, but yeah, we haven't seen their actions yet, though.
Yeah, we haven't quite gotten the full brunt of that yet, but it is just as ruthless.
Yeah, and so anyway, is there anything important to note here about the autopsy?
It's that he's taking out the organs, and whereas in the original movie, Blair, when he took the organs out, they were like, he said that they were basically just regular organs.
Mm-hmm.
They're all messed up and out of sorts and malformed.
Yes, and they're saying that the skin all looks melted instead of burned, and a human body would burn, whereas this thing is melted.
Yeah, that they point that out, and we find out more, but that's going to be later.
Mm-hmm. And then back at the Atomic Bar and Grill.
Oh, this is a great scene.
Oh, this one I fucking loved, especially if I love eggs, but there's something always kind of creepy about the possibility of something being inside of an egg that you don't want.
Yeah.
And
Sarah,
Lewis forces Sarah to leave for the day because there's no customers.
There's one customer, this dude named Shiner.
Yeah.
And he's cracking eggs, he's cooking them open, and this is actually really good because you're going oh crap, something's gonna happen here, you're just waiting for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he cracks it, it falls into the pan, and then it turns into a thing screeching and then scurrying away, and then Shiner's like, something's wrong with your eggs.
Yeah. And then
that was the you gotta be fucking kidding of this script.
Yeah. And then there's the sound of wet feet running across the floor behind the oven. Basically, the eggs all start to hatch at once, and they all form into one big thing.
Well, at first, Shiner gets attacked by the first little thing. It It sprays fluid into his mouth and covers his face, and then the remaining eggs in the basket explode, forming one big thing, which Lewis shoots with his shotgun, only for it to explode into a fluid that covers his face.
Oh, that was beautiful.
And it starts boring into his skin. It's like, ooh.
I would love to see like actual like storyboards of this.
Yeah, it would be really cool to see.
And then we fade to black again, getting us into Act 5 of the script.
And also, I should point out for people who don't know this, TV scripts actually specify their act breaks. Unless
it wasn't written with any act breaks in mind to begin with.
But so when we cut back, Rafferty is working on a power transformer up in his truck's cherry picker because he's basically like a electric guy. And the coyote thing shows up and starts watching him. And so back at the Atomic, Brenner stops for more food, leaving Gates locked in the back seat with the windows up, like you sometimes hear about happening to dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And so he sees Louise staring. Yeah, children too. Yeah, he sees Louise staring at him from inside the kitchen. They did a CSI episode about that.
Yep, I remember that one.
Louise is, he sees Louise staring at him weirdly from inside the kitchen, and he goes to the phone where he gets jumped by the Shiner thing. And Luis's head is revealed to be at the end of a long stalk connecting to a still transforming body. And outside, Gates sees a hand flip the closed sign. Well, it's a gone fishing sign, but...
Is Twin Peaks reference? Oh no, my mind's kind of fried today, so I'm just not firing on my reference cylinders as much. But yeah,
sadly, there would not be a... Sadly, Pete Martell would not be in this because Jack Nance is dead. Yeah, in a bar fight.
That was a donut shop fight. That's even worse. So, and then at the same time...
Sarah picks up Michael.
Yep, Sarah picks up Michael, and then at the same time...
Bob returns home.
Yeah, and Jamie goes back to Harold's place. Like, what are they, neighbors?
Like, he goes back to Harold, and they argue for a little bit. This doesn't really matter.
Yeah, we're just outlining every scene here, almost, but yeah.
Yeah, well, we kind of have to.
Yeah, because it won't make any sense.
And listeners like it when I do that, because I actually got a review on iTunes saying they like the idea of, I'm painting basically a picture of what the movie is like.
Yeah, I heard that. I don't have a problem with it. I just wish I was doing better right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially true of this first part. There's a lot of table setting.
Yeah.
So we'll have more to like chew on as we go along.
Yeah.
Right now it's like, oh, cool thing scene.
Yeah, we're just getting introduced to everything, and my neck is starting to hurt.
Yeah. That was me earlier today. My head and my neck were like, oh, fuck. Right after I woke up, but I'm much better now.
Yeah.
Mountain Dew cures everything.
Yeah. So do you want to start here again with, do you want to like rewind it here a little bit, or just continue?
Let's just continue, because all we really were talking about is like Sarah picks up Michael, Bob comes home, Jamie goes and argues with Harold for a bit, and then Gates, who's still trapped in the back of Brenner's car, he spots an empty soda can and he manages to snag it. And so Little Bear, who's still tracking the coyote thing, comes upon Rafferty near his truck and asks him to point in the direction it went. He does so, but is acting strangely, and you're clearly meant to think, oh, this guy might be a thing. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the best parts of this script, is just this whole little thing with Rafferty.
Yes.
Because you are just on edge the entire time.
Yeah, so we're with Little Bear at the moment?
No, well, we were with Little Bear.
Okay.
Then it goes, after that scene, it goes to Blackburn and Weber. They share a phone call regarding the twisted corpse. Mm-hmm. And he tells her that whatever it was, it can't have it's not a melted together corpse like we thought. It would have looked like that when it was alive. And he says it had rat's blood pumping through its veins, which... That's a new idea for the thing, because you never actually thought what the blood inside it would actually be. Yeah,
it's just whatever it wants to be.
So that means this thing that's foreshadowing something from the flashback later.
Mm-hmm.
Where it got the rat DNA from. But Blackburn, she orders the first responders to be put back in quarantine since they now know it's definitely not smallpox. Mm-hmm. And then not long after this, the corpse sprouts new limbs and it attacks a person in the lab who's wearing a hazmat suit, and we don't get a good look at their face.
And then we outside, we're back with Avery on the phone again.
Yeah, with Blackburn. And she says we have to listen to what Lukinov has to say, and this leads to them They show him the fax pictures of the corpse via computer, and he confirms that the outbreak he was afraid of has happened. And he tells them, burn all the samples until there is nothing left and maintain a strict quarantine. And he gets provisional asylum from Avery, and they say he'll be landing at that abandoned base pretty soon, and that Blackburn is on her way too. And he's also adamant, Lukanov is also adamant that anything that may have had contact with the infection must be handled by, okay, my notes went fucking stupid right here. I think they must be handled by like a group of people. No one should be alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get cut back to Rafferty briefly. He's in his truck, wiping sweat away from his face before driving into town. It's like, okay, this guy's acting nervous about something.
Mm-hmm.
And so we catch up with Little Bear, who has tracked the coyote thing and trapped it against a fence. He shoots it, and it runs, screeching, but it gets caught on the fence, which is revealed to be electrified. And it transforms wildly, with Vitsenko's face emerging from its mouth. And that's when Little Bear is accosted by a Black Hawk helicopter, and the coyote thing gets away as he's, basically arrested by the military guys.
Yeah, and then back at Sarah's house, she's having dinner with Rafferty.
Sarah and Michael are arguing over her boyfriend, who's named Dale, who arrives at the house, and he's revealed to be Rafferty.
I was doing such a bad job earlier of containing this, but yeah.
Oh, it's such a good twist. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I was literally going, what? While I was reading it. Because I've never read this before. Like, I mean, I've read a bunch of the stuff in my file. This is one I never got to.
Yeah, and like I said, this is one I read years ago. But yeah, no, I loved this little turn that they're doing. And I'm like, and for a while I thought that Sarah and Michael, be dead, that we were going with. But, well, something's going to happen here eventually. But I'm trying to remember what I was going to say here. We're about to find out why he's actually nervous.
Yeah, it takes a little while. Little Bear is, he's being held by a soldier in a hazmat suit for breaking this curfew they've established. They confiscate his gun, and he claims to be, have been hunting a skinwalker, but the superior officer that they're talking to over the radio, he wants nothing to do with it and just says, drive this guy back into town. So we go back to the Elliott house. Michael and Rafferty are cooking dinner together, and things are tense. Rafferty's acting weird and nervous. He accidentally cuts himself. And this is when Sarah tells Michael, hey, we're going to get married, which makes him freak out and leave the room. And Rafferty says, okay, I'll go to him later, talk to him one-on-one, man-to-man.
Mm-hmm.
And so we go back to the Atomic. Gates uses the pull tab from the soda can to unscrew the floor plate that he's chained to and breaks the window open with his shackled feet crawling out. And the Brenner thing is watching from the restaurant, and when Gates smashes the driver's side window to get the shotgun, it attacks him. Gates shoots it, causing tendrils to emerge from the wound, which would be really cool. And he takes shelter inside a VW bus. He shoots at the Brenner thing, hitting his car's gas tank, and that blows it up, taking the thing out with an explosion. And then the Luis and Shiner things emerge from the Atomic Cafe and watch him as he drives away in the van.
Yeah, awesome scene.
A bit of it felt a little Precinct 13-ish.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah.
We go back to the Elliott house.
And Rafferty has a man-to-man moment with Michael.
He's talking to him through the locked bedroom door, and Michael it's like, it's just building tension here where he's like trying to talk Michael into opening it, and Michael almost doesn't. And then Dale says something about like, I got something really cool I want to show you, which like, okay, that's creepy in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just about to open the door, but then he doesn't. And he gives up, and Rafferty's the one who actually gives up at the last minute, walking away.
Mm-hmm.
And so Lukanov arrives at the headquarters, and he meets Blackburn. And then back at the Elliott house, Rafferty approaches Sarah, and Michael watches from the top of the stairs, and he's like, I got something I was going to show this to Michael, but I'm going to show you instead. And he pulls out a ring and takes a knee and proposes to her, and he puts the engagement ring on her finger, and that's what he was nervous about. And then he puts it on her finger. And
we're still meant to believe that something's up with him because he's urging her to come closer to him.
And stuff like that. And then, as soon as he gets the ring on her finger, Sarah transforms into a thing and starts swallowing him like a boa constrictor.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap, that was a good twist.
Yeah.
And you never know exactly when she got taken either.
Yeah, sometime at the diner.
It was either at the diner, or maybe she stopped over at Paulette's place and they got her.
Oh yeah, that's another possibility.
Because that's where Michael was supposed to be. That's a possibility. But It's a lot like the Carpenter movie, where it's not entirely clear when exactly everybody was taken.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a good thing. Like, there's 2 specific moments where it could happen.
Then, so this results in a chase scene with Michael jumping out the window and breaking an arm.
Yeah, and she's like banging on the door, trying to knock it down, and he's out there laying on the grass, and she like reverts to her normal voice and starts calling to him, which is really creepy. Yeah,
but but meanwhile inside she still has this, monstrous form to her.
And so that's an act break.
Yep, and she ends with her saying, "Please, Michael, come inside. Let mommy kiss it and make it better."
Yeah, that's just ugh.
Yeah.
And so, we cut back to the middle of town. Bob is putting out the car fire, and Sheriff Hayes arrives on the scene, and he explains that Shiner and Luis both told him that Gates escaped, killed Brenner, and destroyed the car before escaping, so the 2 things are turning people against each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Michael comes stumbling down the street, and hurriedly tells Bob about what happened, and then Hayes orders everyone home for the curfew, and Michael takes Bob home with him. Bob takes Michael home with him, god damn it.
Mm-hmm.
And so Blackburn and Lukianoff, they fly out to the mobile lab in the helicopter, and there's a bit of tension between them, and she's not happy about the fact that, he created biological weapons, and he deflects by saying, "Hey, it was a Cold War going on. I did what I had to do for my country." And so that's setting up for kind of a nice little, it sets up for a nice little development of this relationship between each other.
Yeah,
between
definitely.
The two of them. Hold on just a second. I'll reply to this.
Okay.
All right. And, where the hell was I? Okay. Yeah, they're talking about that. And, the soldiers in the Humvee, they drop off Little Bear in the center of town, and then they go out to collect up all of the first responders again. And the sergeant says something to the effect of, "The military, where everything's so fun, you get to do it twice." And, okay, they're in the living space and back at the Mighty Mart. Bob and Samantha argue about what to do about Michael and how to handle Sarah when they meet, because Bob's like, "Hey, he's wandering around after dark with a broken arm. You're not going to stop me from giving her shit." Like, okay, I like this guy in this part of the script.
Yeah, I don't like him later, but I like him now.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
And so, and while they're talking, Michael sees a Sarah thing in human form. She's outside the window tapping on the glass, which is really creepy. And he just I like this kid because he's really smart. He just starts barricading the door.
Mm-hmm.
And so it starts knocking on the door, asking to be let in, and Bob clears the barrier and opens the door. And so this intercuts between, the Sarah thing trying to explain to what happened and catch Bob and Samantha off their guard. She tries to explain that he walked in on the 2 of them having sex, blah, blah, blah. He's like, "He said you thought you killed him." He's like, "He thought I did too."
Yeah.
And so they tell him, and so the soldiers, they go to pick up Billy, and they tell him his family has to come with too, and he goes to get his wife, who's revealed to be Paulette, who's now a thing covered in slime and tendrils. And so, yes, this means that Billy's full name is Billy Milligan. I was like, "What, really?" when I saw that. And then the Ginny thing walks in behind them and lets out a piercing howl. And so Bob and Samantha, they hear gunfire coming from the Milligan house. And then there's a number of howls from all over town. And Sarah joins in, transforming into a massive tentacles with bits of different animals that is imitated as well. There's like chickens and like a coyote in there, I think.
Yeah, this is also starting to remind me of Dean Koontz's Phantoms.
Oh, yeah, it's been a while since I've read that.
Yeah, or the movie, with the military in town.
Yeah, the movie where Ben Affleck was the bomb. And, but yeah, there's a struggle. Bob loses his shotgun, and then Little Bear, who was just outside when the howls began, he grabs it and he kneecaps the still human legs. And he holds the Sarah thing off while they attempt to escape, and they run into the store, but falling shelves cut them off from the exit, and they hide in the freezer instead. So, whatever we do not get locked in the freezer again. And Lukianoff and Blackburn arrive at the mobile lab, arguing with Weber and Pritchard over the thing body not having been burned yet. And it's revealed that Blackburn is now in charge of the operation at Avery's behest, who has flown out to the site as well. And back at the Mighty Mart, Little Bear is explaining to Bob about the coyote thing when the power goes out all over town. They kick out the freezer's condenser and crawl out of the building, with Little Bear telling Bob, Samantha, and Michael to hide while he goes and tracks down the coyote thing again.
They get locked in the freezer again until Jay and Bob, get them out, but then they get locked again instantly.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's cold in here, hot cold.
We already made that reference.
Yeah. And so they're at the mobile lab, and this is where things start really picking up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it's been picking up. It's been crazy, but this is where we start, getting the puzzle pieces filled in.
Yeah, I think it really starts to pick up. I mean, there's, ebb and flows with this script. The first big one for me is like the egg scene. And then the next one where everything really starts picking up speed, throughout the rest of the, story is, the Rafferty, Sarah scene.
Yeah, that was great. But okay, so Lukianoff is at the mobile lab, and he's performing the hot needle blood test on samples from himself, Blackburn, Avery, Weber, Pritchard, and General Wise, all with a negative result, and he uses a Bunsen burner, which I found that amusing just because it's like, there's scientists in the lab in the original movie, and they use the flamethrower.
Yeah. Well,
but then again, these guys are scientists who never actually do any scientific work in the whole movie.
Yeah.
Most of them just sit around playing cards and farting around in the rec room.
Yeah. And what were they even there for? Just vague Antarctic scientific research.
And okay, so this is where we start getting the backstory. And so in 1982, a Soviet Antarctic base picked up a garbled, version of Windows's distress signal.
US 31 calling McMurdo over.
And so they couldn't respond or call for help because of a storm. They flew out to the American base and found it destroyed, but they also found the map with 2 locations marked on it in the wreckage. One was a destroyed Norwegian base, so that's the only mention that gets, and the other was the crater with the ship in it, which is what got them to call in Lukianoff. Lukianoff explains he was called in to assess if there was any danger from extraterrestrial pathogens, which is really smart, and it's cool they put that in there because that's something you would actually have to think about if you found a crashed saucer.
Yeah, instantly thinking about what could be in there to fuck you over.
Because they do actually talk about that in the original Thing from Another World. They say, we can't unthaw this thing immediately because who knows, what it's got crawling around in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so him, his wife Alina, and his assistant Vygovsky, they explored the spaceship with a commando team along in case they ran into anything big and hostile. Once again, smart.
Yep. And thankfully the ship doesn't blow up with one hand grenade.
Oh god, is that from the prequel?
Yeah, it's from the reshoots.
But inside they found everything was devastated with claw marks on the walls, and they found the corpse of a dead alien, which is very Prometheus.
Yeah, but, thankfully we're not going to, learn that's only, 20 years before the first movie. That for me is what pisses me off more about, the Alien prequels is, you look at the first movie and you think, wow, how long was this ship on LV-426? It's got to be, centuries, maybe thousands of years, maybe even millions of years. No, it's, 20, 30 years before.
Well, actually, they're on a different planet in Prometheus.
I know Prometheus, I'm talking about LV-426. I'm talking about, because Covenant takes place 2 or 3 decades before we get to Alien.
Yeah, but that's a whole fucking mess.
Yeah.
I've put way too much thought into all that bullshit over the years. I'm just banishing it from my mind because Ridley Scott clearly didn't give a shit when he got to Covenant, so I'm not going to give a shit.
He might as well just use the word midichlorians in there.
Oh. But, they found the corpse of the dead alien that's been killed, and it's described as being, insectoid looking. And they find a room with a thick, door, which has been burst open from the inside, and they find a giant, transparent chamber in there, which looks like a giant test tube, which has been broken open. And there they found a sample of thin blood on the floor, which they scraped up and took with them. That's going to be a slight problem later on, but we don't have to talk about that yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ship was sterilized and taken to a facility in Siberia where they've apparently been trying to reverse engineer this thing for the last 23 years with no success.
And then at the same time, they stopped operations once they realized they couldn't control the thing as a weapon.
And the 3 scientists, they took the blood to a lab on Renaissance Island where they performed autopsies on MacReady and Childs, where they discovered the properties of the thing's blood, and this is... Sorry, I lost track of myself. Thinking that they could create a controllable bioweapon that could only affect specific targets, the powers that be ordered them to develop it. And so using Blair's notes as a guide, which apparently survived the fire.
Must have been in a room that wasn't bombed or something.
Yeah, it is kind of funny in this just how much shit actually survived the massive fire at the end.
And then the massive snowstorm for the next 6 months.
Yeah, and it's just it's a far, far, far less extreme example of aliens, colonial marines.
Yeah.
Where, like, everything's still fucking there after that massive explosion. What the hell?
Yeah. And then, and they also mention here that both Childs and McCready were not infected. So there you go. Fan theory videos, please shut the hell up.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice they have here, having that both of them died and both of them were human, because people always seem to at least want to make Childs a thing, but I like this. I like the fact that, they actually did accomplish something in the first movie.
Yeah, and but here, when trying to experiment, Alina gets trapped with the thing and assimilated.
Well, I should mention they say that, they're using Blair's notes as a guide. And they began experimenting with it on rats, and they were using the needle test to confirm infection. I have to mention, that's a bit of a problem I have with this, is that there is no explanation for how they know about the needle test.
Mm-hmm. It would have to be like some last-minute note that McCready made on a tape recorder somewhere.
Yeah, McCready put like a post-it note on the fridge when he went to go get his last beer.
By the way, use blood test. Hot needle, they'll run away from.
Also, it made me laugh a lot when they mentioned that there was nothing unusual about McCready's corpse, except he had an unusually high blood alcohol content.
Yeah. Well, no, that's gasoline that he's forcing the child slain to drink. Like, shut up.
But McCready would not leave his bottle of J&B.
You couldn't defame it with gasoline.
That movie is like the best commercial for J&B ever.
Which pissed off Christian Nyby so much, apparently.
Oh, yeah, I saw that quote. Okay, let me get back to where I was. Yeah, the experiments came to an end when one of the rats fought back and it chewed through Alina's hazmat suit and infected her, and Lukanov just burned her to death, which is like, it's really well done scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was expecting something even worse to have happened in the lab, but no, it was relatively contained.
What were you expecting?
Like, I was expecting, like, way more death to have occurred.
Yeah, like the teenager guy that they have with him, nothing happens to him.
Yeah, Vygotsky just apparently fucked off and had his own life.
Yeah.
But, the project was shut down at Lukanov's insistence, but a single vial of the blood was retained in storage, and this is what the Chechen rebels stole when they raided the lab, thinking it was smallpox. Now, the one thing I have to ask about this is, if it was a Chechen rebel, wouldn't they be more, wouldn't they want to infect themselves and attack Moscow?
Well, we're never, a lot is left up to our imagination here, but, they probably were planning on releasing it on the streets of Moscow and infecting a mass of people, but somehow it got mishandled once I'm going to assume that when they stole it, they didn't keep it frozen and the thing then thawed and then attacked all the terrorists, and then and then there might have been a situation where Ivan thing was the only thing that survived and must have killed the other terrorists in defense, and then immediately thought, I need to go to Hollywood.
I need to go to Hollywood, make a movie about myself.
Yeah. And
put all the special effects companies out of business. But okay, so we cut back to the present, and the other people in the room are highly skeptical of Lukanov's story, wanting to know why the Russian government kept this from them, and Blackburn correctly guesses that they didn't want any competing claims to the spaceship.
Yeah, Norway and the United States would both have a claim. All three countries would have a claim to this UFO.
I mean, yeah, what's Norway going to use the UFO for? I mean,
I don't know. Are they going to go see if the Norse gods are a thing or something? I don't know. See if they can get to Valhalla. I don't know.
See it. They try and go to Asgard, but they just end up on Sakaar.
Shit.
Hey man, big pile of rocks talking at you. But as the part Lukanov reveals the only evidence for his story that he managed to save, which was McCready's cassette tape. And as the part regarding the shredded long johns plays, a worker in the lab finds a shredded hazmat suit in the trash. And Lukanov confirms that there is no cure and that he's open to them using the nuclear option if it proves absolutely necessary. Now I have to point out a problem with this scene. They play back the actual scene from the thing of him recording it, but the problem is that they play back part of the recording that he records over.
Yeah.
bit of a fuck up there.
Yeah, I'm assuming that would just be wiped out in a second draft if ever there was one written.
Yep, and so Little Bear returns home to his ranch where he prepares to go on the hunt again, only to be confronted by Gates, who's hidden out there. And then at the mobile lab, Lukanov listens to the recording of the radio conversation from when Little Bear was picked up, and here's his description of what happened to the coyote, reacting in horror. Weber and Blackburn finish testing everybody in the lab when Lukanov runs in, saying there's been exposure, and they all hurry out, just missing the crash survivor as he comes to in the lab, which is a bit of a problem because at the beginning of the next script, he's asleep again.
I'm going to assume there might have been a rewrite on this draft. If that's the case.
In the 8 months in between them, there would have had to have been.
Yeah, they wouldn't have just sat on this script and then paid the guy 8 months later to, write that second part.
And so they rush into town and they find it's fallen into chaos with buildings burning and bodies scattered in the streets. And that's where part 1 ends. So part 1 as a whole, we're too late. Part 1 as a whole is very, very good.
Yeah, it sets up a stage here for an interest for what's going to be the huge climax here.
Okay, so that brings us to the second half of the miniseries, which on the title page is referred to as, because the title changes, it goes to The Thing, Night 2, Extreme Amplification, which totally sounds like a metal album. And this is also a first draft, but interestingly, it's dated October 7th, 2005, which is like a whole 8 months after the part 1, so.
Yeah, it makes us wonder what happened in the meantime. I'm assuming that this was all written out in a treatment to begin with, and then given approval for a full draft.
I'm assuming they must have spent a long time hashing out the details of part 1.
Yeah, who knows? From what I remember, wasn't there, I've read on Wikipedia that they did have like a page set up on the Sci-Fi Channel's website. Probably wasn't much of a page, because there probably wasn't much to report, but there was a production page listed on Sci-Fi Channel's website once.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, they had a production page, they probably had a logo, and that was probably about it.
Even if that, it might have just had like, kind of like one of those gray images where it will say like, more to come or something like that,
And no more came.
Yeah.
Things are interesting to point out is that even apart from the title page, the script itself feels a little bit different. Like it feels like even the paper is a different size that it was scanned from. It feels like it's written slightly differently. Like it's impossible to describe. You'd have to read it for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, part of it just feels like it's written with a faster pace in mind.
Yeah, like I don't know, something about it just feels slightly less meticulous to me.
Do you think maybe they had thought that this might have been like a 3-part miniseries, and then somewhere along the lines someone said, no, let's just do 2?
That is very possible, but we unfortunately have no way of knowing.
Yeah, I guess we can't get Darabont or Johnson McGoldrick to say anything.
Yeah, he's too busy writing blockbusters, and Darabont would probably just start swearing at us in emails.
Yeah, I am convinced, though, that I sat next to him at a screening for North by Northwest once.
Okay, that's cool.
I have no idea, though. It was just a bald guy wearing a Hawaiian shirt. He looked in Los Angeles. He looked very similar to Frank Darabont. I'm not saying I sat next to Darabont. I'm just saying I could have.
There's this guy who comes to the store I work at who looks like a long-haired version of Ridley Scott. It's hilarious. But
get him to defend Covenant.
But to get started, once again, this is divided into act breaks because it's a made-for-TV thing, and I actually didn't make any note of the act breaks in my notes, so.
I did. So
it begins with, we got the soldiers and, the government people, they're relocating their base of operations to the center of the town, which they then, start surrounding with barbed wire. And they're looking around at the dead bodies and they're saying, nothing like this could possibly move this fast. And of course, then they point out that most of them were, killed with gunshot wounds, basically saying that they were victims of, the mounting paranoia in the town. And it cuts away. That actually reminded me a little bit of like The Stand, where like so many people were killed by the super flu, but a lot of people were just killed by people freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
So then we cut away to Little Bear, who's being held at gunpoint by Gates, but he manages to knock the gun away from him and engage Gates in a fist fight, and they actually crash through the window outside. Getting a little WWE here.
Yeah, well, he's going to throw him off the Hell in the Cell onto the Spanish announcer table.
Oh my... Yeah, but so, and we got back to, like, the command center, and Avery, he demands Pritchard's resignation, saying, he wasn't expecting to get backstabbed when he sent him out there. And Pritchard doesn't take this well, and when Weber tells him about the shredded hazmat suit found in a trash can, he decides to, keep the information to himself.
Yeah, and then we'll see what goes on with that later.
Yeah, it's one of those things they keep cutting back and forth to. And so at the command tent, Wise sets up a search and rescue mission to look for survivors, ignoring Lukinov's insistence on using a nuke. And they're using this satellite to track infrared signatures, and they direct a team of soldiers to the town's old courthouse, where they find Bob, Samantha, and Michael have holed up. And so in the mobile lab, Pritchard turns in his resignation letter, and Avery laments that he sent Pritchard there because he trusted them, and this doesn't affect Pritchard much, who says, I assumed you sent me out here as a power play, because that's exactly what I would have done. And he uses the opportunity there to sneakily steal Avery's coat, and he starts cutting holes in it, because he's starting to, as it becomes kind of obvious here, he's framing him as a thing.
Mm-hmm. And the script does something very clever with this later on, I think.
It does. It does some kind of unexpected things. And so, back at the ranch, which they've started describing as a cabin in this script.
Yeah.
Yeah, Little Bear has Gates hog-tied. He's leaving him on the bed. And he's about to leave him there, even though he's already heard his story about Brenner becoming a monster. And that's when there's a knock at the door, which Little Bear answers to find the Luis thing standing there, pretending to be wounded and accusing Gates of attacking him. And Little Bear goes to tend to the wounds, and he sees a coyote eye looking out at him. And Luis transforms, the thing tearing out of his skin. And so Little Bear shoots at it, drags Gates out of the cabin, untying him. And the thing is, like, banging up against the cabin door, and they're about to go get it, and it stops, and they rip open the door, and it's just standing there, and it says that's meant to be an homage to the thing from another world.
Mm-hmm. Very clever.
But, and it's like, and so they slam the door shut, and it's like pushing it's like breaking it and like shoving its limbs out, and so Little Bear hands a propane tank to it, which it grabs onto, and then he shoots it, which blows up the cabin and the thing.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it's very much it's very much the, fuck you too moment of this. And surviving citizens in town, they get gathered together and placed in the meeting hall to await testing. And at the ranch, Little Bear kills and burns his livestock just to be sure, and then gathers packs full of Molotovs and dynamite, taking a tied up Gates with him, and he literally ties a leash around his hands as they go back out on the hunt.
Yeah.
And we see a helicopter pursues and slaughters a coyote with miniguns and missiles, only for it to be revealed at the last minute that the coyote thing has been watching this from a distance.
And in another callback to John Carpenter's The Thing, the writer states that this is, our version of that opening to The Thing.
Only way more insane.
Yes, because instead of just a couple of Norwegians with grenades and a rifle, this is a fully mounted helicopter.
Yeah, not dropping the grenades on themselves.
Yeah.
And so the survivors, they get lined up for Lukinov to take blood samples, and, Bob starts arguing with him and tries to get answers. And while this is going on, we see a man wearing a red flannel shirt whose face we don't see. He arrives with more survivors in a truck and starts wandering around in the crowd. And Michael ends up sitting next to him, and he's revealed to be the Dale thing. And so he tries to grab Michael, but the kid stabs him in the eye with a fork. And the medics at first think he's having a seizure, but Blackburn sees the look on Michael's face and orders him to stand down. And so it transforms, impaling a medic and dragging him up into the ceiling. And so this was a little confusing, because it read to me that the medic comes back down alone and now a thing. And it gets taken out by the flamethrowers after it almost gets Blackburn. And I was a little confused as to what happened to the Dale Rafferty thing. Did it come back down too? Is it still in the attic?
It could just scurry off and try to rejoin its own group, I guess.
Yeah, that's not clarified.
It's just meant to be an enigma for us. I mean, it kind of feels like in the ending of the thing where they were originally supposed to show Knowles and Blair as part of the thing at the very end of the movie, but they never got a chance to finish that effect.
And also,
that reminds me of that.
And it also reminded me of, because for years watching the kennel scene, I thought part of it broke off and crawled away, but it's just the way it's shot. All it did is grab onto the rafters and pull itself up into the corner.
Yeah, it's a last ditch offense.
Yeah, it just, because it's not clear the way it's shot until you get the long shot of it, of it burning and then falling. And for years, because of the framing of the VHS, I didn't notice that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this incident finally convinces Blackbird that Lukianoff is on the up and up, and she convinces Avery to go with the nuclear option. He calls the president and suggests as much to him, but it's not long after this that the shredded jacket is found, and Pritchard uses it to order Avery placed under arrest and locked in the isolation room. So he's trying his best to come out of this situation and further his career.
Mm-hmm.
And so they performed a needle test on Avery's blood multiple times, and it comes up negative every time. And this would appear to clear him, but Lukianoff points out that every person gathered in the meeting hall has also come up negative, which is either incredibly lucky or means the things have somehow adapted to the test, which is kind of a freaky idea.
Yeah, that every time it gets tested, it realizes it needs to adapt, so after a while it would learn to not jump from a hot needle.
Yeah, and that explanation actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a very creepy idea because the blood test to this point has been the thing's greatest weakness because it's such an easy test to perform. Although I've always wondered why it never jumps away from being stabbed.
Yeah,
with a needle or, whatever, suspension of disbelief. But yeah.
It's one of those things where you kind of have to fudge the details.
Yeah.
And so in the meeting hall, the survivors, things are starting to grow tense because they're not trusting each other anymore. And Michael is being heavily suspected since both Sarah and Dale were taken, yet he apparently wasn't. And, the big ringleaders of this are basically Harold and Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a group of white dots are spotted via infrared satellite clustering around an electronics store, and the squad is sent to investigate. And every military squad in this half of the script gets a special code name, and I did not bother writing them down because it ultimately doesn't matter.
Yeah, it was like Phantom, and then there was Ghost.
And there was a few others.
Yeah.
And they find a large hole in the floor, so they stumbled into Daredevil Season 2. And most of the team gets yanked down into it by unseen things, while the leader comes face to face with the Sarah thing and gets attacked. And this is all seen from the command tent via video feed from their shoulder cameras. And so in the command tent, the main group of characters, they receive a conference call from the president, informing him of Avery's possible infection, as well as the possibility that the needle test no longer works. And he agrees to go forward with the nuclear option, and during this, Pritchard starts getting this, oh fuck, look on his face, because he wasn't in the meeting previously where they set this up. And so they arrange for the bomb to be flown out there with 10 hours for them to find a new test before the bomb detonates. And General Wise orders that this information stays with them and that they should all be paired up from now on. And he has a sergeant named Dobson guard Pritchard specifically because I'm guessing even he's not trusting Pritchard at this point. So that's...
Yeah, well, everyone needs a guard with him essentially at this point. So.
Yeah, but he said, oh, pair up. And he goes, hey, you guard this guy. Specifically, this guy got a guard.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, he's living up to his name.
And then what's the scene after that? Let's see here.
It's they see two figures on the satellite walking into the desert.
Oh yes.
That's who he says, okay, have them taken in and use lethal force if they resist. And it turns out to be Little Bear and Gates in pursuit of the coyote thing, and Little Bear's going on about his whole skinwalker thing. And they so easily could have had Gates say, I'm not buying this voodoo bullshit in this scene, but thankfully they don't.
Yeah, the script does use a couple of lines later on. In the very end is when the writer decides to I'll start using this line and that line, but he only does it twice.
Yeah, there's a you gotta be kidding moment.
Yeah, which I would assume would be uncensored if they were to do a home video release.
I mean, Sci-Fi Channel has done that before. Man Thing debuted on Sci-Fi Channel in 2005, and the home video version has tits in it. And the Sci-Fi Channel Children of the Corn remake has an extended, ridiculously long sex scene in the final act on the home video version.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be too surprising if they did something like that. And also, when Gates is tied up earlier, he actually is saying, "Come on, get me loose, get me loose." But
I forgot about that part.
I forgot about it till just now. And so they're talking, and Little Bear says he thinks that, the coyote thing is heading for this place that's sacred to his people named Sagi Canyon. I am totally guessing on the pronunciation there. And that's when a helicopter flies by looking for them, and they slide down into a ravine with Little Bear pulling a desert camo tarp over them, and they hide and wait.
And have they done the Kimosabi reference yet?
I believe they have, because throughout their interactions right here,
they start to bond.
Yeah, they bond a little bit, and Gates is calling him Kimosabi, and he goes, Kimosabi was the white guy, right?
Yeah, so I thought that was clever.
Yeah, I was thinking when he first started saying that, I'm like, Kemosabe was the white guy, dude, and then they pointed out, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And so back at the command tent, they're watching the footage of the earlier attack inside the electronics store, and they're like going like, well, where were these guys dragged down to? Because this building doesn't have a basement, which means that they've gone somewhere that they don't know about. And so Pritchard orders a request for information to be sent out on all channels. And we get back to the coyote thing. It enters the canyon, and there's some cliff dweller ruins. Cliff dweller ruins. Goddamn, that's harder to say out loud than I thought it would be.
Say it 3 times.
No, I am not summoning Candyman.
All right.
It hears something and finds a den of coyotes in a cave. And, its head splits open, and you get the idea that it's going to copy this entire group of coyotes. And so Little Bear and Gates enter the canyon soon after, and Little Bear plans on setting up on higher ground and watching, the only entrance because it's a box canyon. And they soon hear a whole group of coyotes howling, and they're like, uh-oh. But it cuts back to the mobile lab, and Pritchard starts arguing in Avery's favor now, wanting to be taken out of there to a CDC facility, but Blackburn won't hear it. And then Blackburn and Lukanov has a moment where he talks about his family, explaining his willingness to die there if he has to. And so those two continue to bond.
And we get a setup for the ending by Lukanov saying that he would hum to his children. Was the song? It plays in 2001.
Oh, I can't quite recall what it was.
I have it written down here. Gaian's Adagio or something.
I'd have to look it up. I didn't bother to look it up.
Okay.
That's the solid state of research on this channel. Yeah, and elsewhere, Pritchard asks Dobson about his family and then tells him about the nuke, trying to get him on his side. And now we get yet another group of soldiers. They're investigating possible hostile activity, discovering that the things have stripped all of the cars parked along the street of all their parts and all their metal. And they find a Ginny thing carrying off a car engine before getting ambushed by the previous squad, which has been replaced by things. And it's actually a well-written scene because they think it's their backup and they don't realize that it's the disappeared squad until the light on the helicopter moves.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's pretty cool.
And that, we would see the squad is already being kind of like zombies in a way. They're kind of they're they have tethered uniforms and whatnot.
Call of Duty zombies.
Yeah.
And the sounds of the battle outside cause tensions in the meeting hall to rise even further, and Jamie is continuing to suspect Michael and antagonize Bob. So that's an ongoing thing. And so Little Bear and Gates, they've set up their position in the cliff dwellings. And they take out several coyote things with Molotovs and dynamite arrows, which is really cool.
Yeah, is that like what Krauser has in Resident Evil 4?
Does he?
In the Mercenaries game, you get arrows, but I don't think they're dynamite arrows.
Oh, yeah. But I really just remember getting shot by those asshole monks in that one room. But the most horrible room in that game.
Go away.
Yes. Where him. Okay, so Gates tries to run off, and so he threatens, Little Bear with a Molotov or whatever, so there's a brief standoff, but they're spotted and attacked by the helicopter, and this forces them to flee into the caverns beneath the cliff dwellings, where the last coyote thing, at least the one on the surface, had fled as well. And they find a steel tunnel blocked with rebar, but that's been pulled open, presumably by the thing. And at the command tent, Wise realizes that the things have been raiding the surface for as yet unknown reasons, and we find out the requests for information have so far turned up nothing, and when they check the Pentagon database, Christmas comes up as classified, because they know all about Santa Claus. Wise orders a call to the president in order to gain clearance. And I believe that is an act break.
Yep. Oh, yeah, it's literally the last line is we need immediate access to it, to this. Get me the president on the line.
Yep. And Avery's blood, they subject it to every known test, but still comes up as normal. And apparently the testimony from the townsfolk is too garbled to glean anything from because they were too busy hiding and running. Weber gets the idea to wake up the survivor from the plane crash and question him, which they agree to despite the danger involved.
And despite in the previous script him already having woken up, apparently.
So I guess he woke up, passed out again.
Yeah.
And so meanwhile, Little Bear and Gates, they track the coyote thing down the tunnel, finding themselves in the abandoned missile silo. It cuts back to the command tent where Wise finally has the necessary information and shows a computer-generated map of the old missile facility that lies beneath the town. And it's been shut down for a very long time, so it's specific that there's no nukes down there or anything anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And he's certain that the things are hiding down there, but the place is massive and they only have a few hours left to search. And this is where Pritchard just completely loses it. So him and Dobson, they head to the helipad. They're going to try and steal a helicopter and escape. Dobson kills 2 guards without hesitation. And then we cut back to Blackburn, Lukianoff, and Weber. They're talking to the survivor who tells them about Vitsenko's apparent heart attack on the plane, which happened right before things went bad. And I was honestly expecting there to be more to who this survivor guy was, but he's just a guy who was on the plane.
Yes, but Yuri thanks him for it afterwards here.
Yeah, and so this gives Lukianoff the idea to test for infection by using electric shock, which, as we saw in the original movie, that brought out the Norris thing, and it worked on the plane and at the fence, because he's heard about the fence already. And so the survivor dies, confirming that he was human.
Again, questioning, though, because it cuts back to this specific moment about John Carpenter's The Thing. How would Yuri have known that this was caused by the defibrillator being used on Norris thing?
Because it was on that post-it note McCready left on the fridge talking about the blood test.
Yeah, need more J&B, and by the way, electricity seemed to bring it out.
And so Pritchard and Dobson, they hold a pilot and co-pilot hostage, trying to make them fly the helicopter out of there. But the 2 dead guards get spotted, and their plan gets rumbled. Looking to cover his ass, Pritchard takes the gun, shoots the pilot and co-pilot dead, and then runs out of the helicopter and goes, "Hey, this guy took me hostage." That's totally a Nightbreed moment right there.
Yeah.
He's got a gun. And so 2 guards try to subdue Dobson and end up tasering him, which reveals him to be a thing, which is quickly killed with a flamethrower while Pritchard runs like a bitch.
Yeah, now panicking, realizing that he's losing everything around him.
Then we go back to the silo, and Little Bear and Gates are tracking down the coyote thing, only to be surrounded by a dozen just like it. And the original, it gets dubbed the Alpha thing here, and its head splits open, revealing Vitsenko's face. And they run away, climbing a ladder to get away from it, and it actually grows a pair of arms to climb after them. And, as they're climbing, the ladder is, tearing away from the wall. And Gates makes it up to the top okay, but right before Little Bear can get up there, it swings to the other side, and he breaks his leg against the metal wall. And he manages to clamber onto a catwalk and knock the ladder loose completely, dropping the Alpha thing to the bottom. And right before he knocks it down, the face, opens and just shows teeth. So another transformation. And so they're separated, but Gates continues on into the facility, promising to come back for him.
Yeah, showing here that Gates is a character worth caring about.
Yeah, although it's a little fast the way that happens, because 5 minutes ago he was pointing like a Molotov at him. And so, at the meeting hall, the paranoid crowd, led by Harold, gets violent, wanting to lock Michael up in the closet, and Bob's kind of come over to their side too. Unfortunately. And Hayes intervenes, trying to talk them out of it, and he ends up diverting suspicion onto Harold, saying he was hiding out with Dale all night, and the mob turns on him, viciously beating him, and as we find out, they beat him to death.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of In the Mist, the one sacrificial character that they have in the movie that they toss out of the store to get killed, which was actually Frank Darabont's contribution to the story, so it kind of reminded me of that. Yeah,
that's one of the changes. That in the ending. Yeah, it is a bit like that. And so as that's going on, Hayes gets Samantha, Michael, and Jamie's kid Taylor, and sneaks off with them while everyone else is distracted. And as Lukianoff goes to test out the electricity theory on Avery's blood, Pritchard, using his security card, enters the isolation room and attempts to make a deal with Avery. Goddamn, this guy thinks he could talk his way out of anything.
Yeah.
And so Hayes takes Samantha and the boys to the men's room, wanting to help the kids escape through the small window. And that's when another military squad, the third one, they arrive on the scene in the meeting hall to break up the situation. And, Bob sneaks up behind the soldier, grabs his sidearm, and takes him hostage, causing a standoff. And Hayes can't get the window open to the bathroom, so he breaks the glass, and the sudden sound causes all hell to break loose in the main hall, with the townspeople overwhelming the soldiers. And Bob freaks out, thinking it's something else in the dark, and he shoots one of them. And, Hayes, he sends the 2 boys out through the broken window, telling them to run. So, building sort of the paranoia there.
Yeah.
And, holding up in the town hall like that is a little bit like, the Blob remake that Darabont wrote. And, Pritchard, he's hashing out his deal with Avery, agreeing to admit to the setup in return for immunity and a retirement package. And Avery's Yeah, Avery's like, oh God, really? But he agrees. And that's when Lukianoff and Blackburn show up, shouting for Pritchard to get out of there because they were just about to test his blood. We didn't see what happened with the electricity test.
Yeah, cutaway. A nice cutaway moment.
Yeah, and then they show up and they're like, Pritchard, get out of there. He's like, it's okay, I got this figured out. And then Avery transforms into a thing, spraying Pritchard with fluid and taking his security card to swipe the doors.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another twist.
Yeah, this is this was my favorite moment of part 2, without a doubt.
Now, I'm guessing Dobson was the guy in the hazmat suit.
Yeah.
And then he somehow got to Avery when Avery was there.
But it was able to make it so that his clothing didn't get ripped.
Yeah, somehow.
Well, it's been suggested by some people that the whole ripping through clothing thing is actually just a ploy that the thing uses to actually trick people into thinking that it would be a severe enough assimilation process that would rip through somebody's clothing, so that the whole clothing method might just be a red herring altogether.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's getting out of there, and Blackburn hits the emergency containment button, sealing the lab, and Lukianoff uses a Bunsen burner to set off the sprinklers, which, causes the floor to start flooding. And so they stand on a table with a rubber mat on top of it. They knock over the electrical equipment, which fries the Avery thing before it can get to them.
Yeah.
Which is a cool scene.
Which also kind of I'm trying to remember if that reminds me of even the thing from Another World.
It reminds me of Deep Blue Sea. Because that's the thing where she stands on the wetsuit.
Yeah.
And the remake of the first Resident Evil where you gotta knock the thing into the water with the shark.
Mm-hmm.
In the underground base, Gates follows the tunnel, marking his path as he goes, and he sees some townspeople things carrying off more scavenged items down a certain tunnel, and he hides before continuing his journey back. Further back, Little Bear makes his way down a different hallway, and he comes face to face with a rabbit, which is not specified to be a thing or not at this point, but we'll find out later.
Mm-hmm.
And back in town, Taylor leads Michael to an abandoned lot and shows him a large hole, which, as we can figure out, is leading to the underground base, saying that he plays down there all the time. And so they jump down the hole, and they're sliding down like a slope, and they end up in a tunnel like the one Gates was in, and it's really dark.
Kind of reminds me of like the Texas Badlands moment from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Only not as big.
Yeah.
But Michael's, separated from Taylor. He's calling out for him, and emergency lights come on, and he runs into the Sarah thing and just starts running away from it. And he sees Taylor, crouched down on the floor looking like he's crying. And he goes to him and he lifts his face up, and his mouth and his eyes are now mouths filled with fangs. And that reminded me of, the Corinthian from Sandman.
Mm-hmm.
And so Taylor was a thing all along, which is a pretty good twist.
Yeah, I can read here the description. Suddenly, Taylor looks up. His eyes have turned into little mouths filled with rows of needle-sharp teeth. His mouth a gaping maw of jagged fangs. So
yeah, pretty good image. And so Michael runs with the Taylor thing, which grows it basically starts charging after him on all fours. It's in pursuit, and he bumps into Gates, who helps him and shoots at the thing, and they flee from it, and they run into a tunnel where there's a bunch of things in it, and they start going after them as well, and they keep running, and they find a shaft with a ladder leading up, and they get to the top where they're helped by some soldiers who fry the pursuing things with flamethrowers. Mm-hmm. And it's described as shooting the flame directly into the camera.
Yeah, which is another nice image.
And so we get to the command tent, and Blackburn and Lukianoff have a video conference set for the president and top advisors, and they have the Pritchard thing strapped to a chair, which they electrify, and this is causing it to revert back to previous shapes, including Avery and Alina, and it even briefly goes to Blair and Palmer from the original movie, which you have to wonder, they got the blood from the spaceship, how's it taking on those shapes?
Yeah. I think we should read part of this out loud, actually, because this is my favorite part.
Oh, just all the dialogue? Let me
sure,
see. What page is it on?
Let's see. Do we want to start on page 77 or with like the very beginning of the scene, or do we want to go to where we start with the reverting of the thing?
Let's do the reverting.
Okay, let's see where we're at here. Let's see. Should we start here? All that's left of Pritchard is his face sticking out of the side of Avery's head.
Yeah, let's start.
You want to start? Okay.
Okay. You want to do it?
Sure. Blackburn gestures to Summers, and he turns the power down The sizzling Avery Pritchard thing writhes and squirms in the chair, glistening and deformed and hideous. Please help me out! Everyone is visibly shaken. Lukanov turns to Blackburn, amazed.
Do you want me to do a Russian accent?
Sure.
Do you see what's happened? It's regressed. Reverted to a past form. Again.
I think you've made your point, Doctor.
We've only scratched the surface. I can't do this. We've only scratched the surface.
To the webcam.
Yeah, this organism has imitated life from worlds we haven't even imagined yet. All those past lives, all that genetic information is stored in every cell. We can cause it to regress, reveal its past forms, peel it like an onion, like an ogre.
Yeah.
It's a
Blackburn.
chance. Yeah, it's Blackburn. It's a chance to find out what it's been, where it comes from, maybe even what it wants.
The others turn to Blackburn. She nods. Summers turns the knob. The Avery thing shrieks as its head is reabsorbed, but Pritchard's face remains on as a new head emerges. Vichenko. It looks around, moaning and terrified. Then Vichenko's head melts away as we witness an increasingly hallucinatory display of life forms bursting forth and withering away. Coyotes, rabbits, bird-headed nightmares, Lewis from the diner, characters from the Carpenter movie. I want to come back inside. Don't you understand that? I'm all right. I'm much better.
Cheers to the gods, man. They practically own South America.
And then another head appears. It's Alina, Lukanov's wife. Lukanov goes pale, stricken at the sight.
Alina?
The Alina thing hears him through the speakers and looks up. Lukanov moves to the window, puts his head on the glass, overcome with emotion.
My wife.
The Alina thing speaks in Russian, but the Pritchard face speaks simultaneously in English, like a parasite sharing its brain. Yuri, is that really you? I can't see you. What are you? Oh, I've waited so long. Tears well in Lukanov's eyes. Yuri? We don't know why we are so afraid of it. It wants peace. When all the creatures of the earth are one, how could there ever be anything but peace?
Peace, no. Death.
Death is an illusion. Individuality is a dream. I see it now. We're all connected. Please, Yuri, set me free. There is so much that I could show to you. We can be together, part of an unending consciousness. We can live forever. Forever as one, my love. Lukanov is trembling with grief and longing. Blackburn and the others watch in breathless silence. A beat. Then Lukanov gathers himself, his anguish giving way to white-hot anger.
Again.
Summers turns the knob again, and the alien thing screams. The electrodes spark, and one of them catches fire. Alina's head is reabsorbed into convulsing thing, loses all human shape. The display grows ever more hallucinatory and surreal until the flesh splits to reveal crab-like limbs and a huge insectoid head. It is an alien like the one Lukanov found in the spaceship in Antarctica. We've seen elements of its morphology in some of the forms the thing has taken. What the hell is that?
We've regressed it to one of the aliens we found in the crashed spacecraft.
The alien thing speaks in a strange, unintelligible language, but several vestigial half-melted human faces still speak English. You want to do these voices together here?
Yeah, let's like alternate the lines because it gets like poetry-ish.
Yeah. Please
release us.
Blackburn joins Lukanov at the glass. We found your vessel. There was something on it. Something that destroyed you. We explore.
Collect life.
Samples from many worlds.
One was infected.
Gathered by accident.
Found out too late.
Took us one by one.
Turned us against ourselves.
Abomination! Exterior space flashback footage from the Carpenter movie, the opening shot. The spaceship flies past us, wobbling as it approaches Earth, bursting into flame as it enters the atmosphere. It wanted our vessel.
Wanted to spread.
We crashed here on purpose.
To destroy it.
But it survived. Interior mobile lab, observation room night. Forgive us.
Release us.
Help us.
Destroy you. Destroy you. Regress it to its purest form.
Summers cranks the power. The faces scream. Mouths growing wider and wider. Jaws distending and taking on new shapes. Suddenly, the alien thing erupts into abject chaos. Seemingly subliminal flashes of faces, limbs, organs begin boiling out of it. Previous lives, creatures from 100 worlds, bizarre and unknown, changing and reforming so fast we can barely make them out. The sturdy restraints snap like rubber bands. Bolts of electricity arc around the isolation room. The thing reverts to its raw state. A swirling amorphous mass. Lukanov shouts through the glass.
What do you want?
The dark whirlpool of seething flesh and blood begins shrieking from 1,000 toothless mouths. Live! 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 Live!
What do you want of us?
Die! Die! Die!
Die!
Then it explodes, splattering the window with protoplasm. Blackburn and the others jump back, startled. The window is obscured with a viscous slime as it slowly drips away. We see that the room is now empty. The thing is gone. Aside from the burst goo dripping off the walls, there's nothing left. Go to black.
End of Act 6.
Yeah, goddamn, that would have been awesome to see.
Yeah, that would have been cool. I like how it fills in the backstory without, being stupid about it.
Yeah, it doesn't need to tell me what happened at the Norwegian base.
And I like the idea, I like the idea that they picked it up and didn't even know they had it.
Yeah, and it just sort of grew from there.
Because that's always been, that's something that's always been sort of a subject of debate is, was it flying the spaceship or was it just on the spaceship?
Well, yeah, because if you see how it looks in the opening of the movie, it looks the ship itself looks completely fine, suggesting that it's being manipulated to crash on Earth.
There's that too, and I think it's in Carpenter's commentary where he brings up the idea that there is no true original form of the thing, and so having it just be this amorphous mass of slime and mouths kind of fits that.
Mm-hmm.
So
then going on to Act 7.
Yep. The evacuation plan has now been approved thanks to the new test being proved to work, and preparations are in full swing. But as we learn, it's not as simple as getting out of there because the underground base was designed to withstand a nuke. So the team will have to go down and wipe them out. And Gates gets, earmarked to help them find where the things were gathered because, he saw them moving down that specific tunnel. And they set out with Lukanov and Wise going along. And so we go back to the town. We find out, the townspeople in the meeting hall are holding the soldiers hostage, and Blackburn is sent in to negotiate. And after some arguing, she goes, "Hey, there's a nuke flying in here that's going to go off in a few hours, so maybe we should leave the building and agree to the new test." And they do. And in the underground base, the team finds all of the things gathered in an underground staging area, having constructed a fleet of tiny flying saucers, which they plan to escape through the silo. So basically like a larger scale version of what Blair was trying to do.
Yeah, and that's always one complaint people have is how was Wilford Brimley able to just move around and get all these big parts. But, I mean, imagine the thing probably just breaking that form for a while and going into whatever strong form it wanted.
I mean, I'd imagine it just sort of could make its fingers really thin or something and get it out through the door and unlock it from the outside.
Yeah, well, no, but earlier in the script we do see Ginny thing holding up a car part.
Yeah, it's an engine.
Yeah, it's an engine, just the entire engine, not the little battery, but no, the entire goddamn engine. Suggesting that the thing in any form it has can have a pure strength if it wants to. But yeah, I like that the thing is so ingenious enough that it's just able to take all these car parts and build whatever it has to escape.
Yeah, obviously it absorbed MacGyver at some point.
Yeah.
And so Wise, he's communicating with the different teams that have been sent down there, and he's telling them to start placing, explosives around to destroy the area. Back at the meeting hall, Blackburn has begun gathering blood samples to perform the test on, and in the base, the team continues their preparations, but they get spotted by the Taylor thing, who is now a head on a stalk attached to another body, but still has, the mouth eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives away their location, and go back to the command tent. The tests are going on, and it's interesting. They're doing them out of sight of the townspeople so that they can't Like it's actually like a really interesting way to go about it because, you know, it's basically keeping them in the dark to avoid an incident.
Yeah, which is brilliant on these characters' parts.
And Blackbird, you know, finds a positive.
Mm-hmm.
And they torch it immediately. And in the base, you know, a little bear thing emerges from the crowd and talks to Gates, trying to convince him that the things will restore the balance as he was talking about earlier. So this is where we learned that little bear has become a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a shame because he's one of the best characters in this.
Yeah, and but it gives Gates sort of a moment of badassery.
Yeah. And so, you know, and so they keep talking, and this keeps the things distracted long enough for a strike team to burst in from behind, and an all-out battle ensues, and Gates just starts chasing after the little bear thing with his flamethrower, and he ends up torching the Ginny thing, so once again, that's another kid we've killed off.
Mm-hmm.
And so, back at the meeting hall, 16 of the townsfolk are separated out and taken outside, and at first you think that it's going to be, you know, these are the things, but then they get taken outside, and then... You know, it turns out they were the only humans left in the bunch and everyone else gets torched. Now, I have a slight problem with this in that all those people and there are things and not a single one of them is actually a named character.
Yeah, it's still, was the sheriff one of them though?
Don't think so. I'm pretty sure all the named characters are taken outside.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a little sucky, I guess, but it's still a cool moment here with these things realizing that they're actually getting torched.
And there was a moment when they were giving out their blood samples where Bob asks, like, is it possible that, like, someone could be one of these things and not know it? And Blackbird's just like, I don't know.
Yeah. Personally, if you ask me, I do think they are fully aware.
Yeah, that's what I think, too. But it's one of those things where, like, even Carpenter doesn't have an answer for it because they talk about it on the commentary, him and Kurt Russell, and even, like, there's a whole bunch of things where Carpenter's like, I don't know.
But for me, this script at the very least demonstrates that actually it does have self-awareness.
Yeah, a little bit. I don't think it actually says.
Okay.
The last time Hayes is mentioned is when Samantha's getting pulled out of there. So I guess maybe he was one?
Yeah, let's see. Bob steps forward. Yeah, I'm looking through here too. Samantha, then Maureen, and everyone's a dick to Maureen. Nobody helps her up. She's pregnant.
Wouldn't that have been a crazy twist if the pregnant woman was a thing?
I always thought when I was reading the script for the first time that, like, there was going to be some weird, fucked up moment with this pregnancy thing, and that would have been cool to see, but it doesn't do that.
It does not go to AVP Requiem territory.
So I guess, thank you? I don't know.
Oh, yes, Hayes in the other seat and coming... And then back away from the doorway, screaming as the realization. Yeah, so Hayes is one of them.
Yeah, so Hayes is a named character, but yeah, no character that we were like getting, really attached to necessarily.
And so what he was doing was an excuse to try and get, one more thing out of the building.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's actually really clever.
Yeah, so the thing was organizing itself to try to escape to begin with.
And so the battle in the staging area continues, and the silo doors are beginning to open, and Lukanov is like, hey, we've got to get to the control room. And Gates finally corners, and, because the little bear thing just bursts out at him with a scythe. And he corners him, and he nails it with the flamethrower. But the head sprouts legs and eye stalks and becomes one of those spider heads from the original. And most of the other things do as well, who all crawl towards the spaceships and take off in them. And so, yeah. And it's described as being like the big trailer moment.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's the one moment in this thing that is just pure fan service.
Oh yeah, well, it's kind of like in the video game. Like, I think like 80% of the enemies or something like that are the head crabs or something.
Yeah, they are basically just head crabs from Half-Life.
Well, Spoonie pointed that out when Spoonie still had a brain.
When Spoonie still did anything.
Yeah, well, yeah, but like as we all know, the game is just really pukes and fuses.
And so, are they implying that Wilford Brimley's head was going to pop off and fly away in that flying saucer? He's going to bring the message of diabetes to the aliens.
I'm trying to remember if he also sponsored Quaker Oats.
He did. He did an oatmeal.
Yeah, that's right. I remember now.
But Wise gets overtaken by people things, but passes Lukanov a satchel charge, and he heads for the control room. And so we cut back to the surface, and the evacuation is in full swing with everybody getting herded into helicopters. And, we go back to the base, and Gates and the rest of the soldiers continue to pursue and fire on the saucers, while Lukanov makes it to the control room, coming face to face with the Sarah thing, whom he tases, before flipping the switches to close the silo doors, and they close just in time, and a few crash into them and get destroyed. And, we go back to the surface, and Blackburn, the remaining team members are about to take off in the C-130, but she's going we're gonna stay, we're gonna wait for, the rest of just to figure out if anybody can make it out in time.
Yeah, and
they literally only have 17 minutes.
Yeah, they have 17 minutes to get out, and it would take them 14 minutes to get out of the danger zone.
Yep, and so in the control room, Lukanov, he's not going to make it out, so he takes the photo of his grandchild out, puts it on the console. I think this is where he starts humming.
Yeah, the song. And then the song plays over, the writer specifies that, the song is playing throughout, every scene here in the ending.
Yep, and he waits for the things to burst through the door, and he sets off the satchel charge, which destroys the control room. And in the silo, the saucer piloted by the Little Bear thing emerges from the wreckage and finds a way out through the tunnel that Little Bear and Gates entered the silo from in the first place, because things, can, retain the memory of the person they imitate.
Which I thought was a really clever escape.
And so Gates and a handful of men manage to escape the tunnels before the charges go off and are picked up by Blackburn, leaving on the last plane out. And so the saucer emerges from the tunnel in the canyon, and Blackburn catches a glimpse of it just before the nuke goes off. And it then cuts to Blackburn testifying before a hearing, saying that nothing has been found to have escaped, but if something has, it will only be a matter of time before they know it, because it's 27,000 hours or something.
Yeah.
I think they said. And it's only a matter of time before they'll know it and things start to go bad. And then we get a last glimpse of the Little Bear thing walking among people before it ends.
In New York.
So either they're going, the world is fucked, or we're setting up a sequel, or both.
Yeah. I would have been very interested in seeing how this would have continued.
If they would have done the V thing and tried to make it into a series.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, that's Return of the Thing.
Yeah, it's a good 2-part TV movie script. It actually does it actually does do justice to the original movie, and it's dedicated to John Carpenter, Rob Bottin, and Bill Lancaster,
who sadly passed away in 97.
So before the movie really got reevaluated.
Yeah, I think just as it was starting to. I know that he gave one interview on that main Laserdisc making of at the time.
Oh, yeah. Which I think is on all the versions that have come out.
Yeah, except it was cut to ribbons on the first Blu-ray release.
Oh.
And it's a featurette within the movie, so you have to watch it within the movie.
It's one of those stupid, hit the button to get the Easter egg things.
Yes, but yeah, I know. It's funny when the Laserdisc is a better print than you.
Yeah, so it's like that thing where you have to hit the button at the right time in the Dodgeball DVD, and Ben Stiller will give you the finger.
Yeah.
But no, this actually would have been really interesting to see if they maybe cleaned up some of the
continuity,
some of the continuity and some of the messier bits. Just gave it a few tweaks here and there. This could have been pretty good, but unfortunately, this came as just kind of a transitional period in Sci-Fi Channel's history. They weren't doing as many miniseries because they weren't doing as well, and they were doing more reality shows. And eventually, there was the regime change, which ended with the infamous logo change
that we all know about. Yep,
everybody made fun of it for a decade, and then people just got tired of talking about it.
Yeah, and then now we sort of take Syfy seriously again.
A little bit.
Yeah, they're I think doing better than they were a decade ago, if you ask me. There's no doubt about that.
I think somewhere around Sharknado 5, they just went, even they realized what a joke they were and went, maybe we should scale things back.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, Sci-Fi Channel original movies always sucked, but it was one of those things where it was they just reached the level of meta self-awareness with that, where it's okay, we can't go any further.
Yeah, I mean, Sharknado, when we all collectively in 2013 were asking ourselves what Sharknado was, and even though that sort of put sci-fi back on the map, I think that then around that time is when they started to turn around. But I remember one show in particular pissed me off at the time. That was Collection Intervention.
Oh, I didn't see that.
It barely lasted, but it was a show where they go to couples' houses where one couple disagrees with the other person in the relationship over how much shit they have.
God, it's
it's not. But it's not even a case of like hoarding. It's just that this person collects a lot. But then it was, if I remember correctly, there was like one episode where the guy to get rid of his like long box of like 90s comics and traded in for like one issue of Incredible Hulk that you're never gonna read.
Yeah,
Like a first issue. And it's like, I don't collect first issues. I'm going to collect what I read, so I don't go for the super expensive stuff.
That's why I buy trades. But it just was unfortunately a period where the big, like, we're gonna try and be prestige and have all these shows and we're gonna put out miniseries, and it was only like it only took like 5 more years or so before even Stargate started collapsing.
Yeah, because there was like Stargate Universe, Stargate Atlantis, and then I've heard Stargate Universe is really good, but they canceled it 2 seasons in or something.
Yeah, I heard it wasn't popular at first, and it did terribly in the ratings, but from what I hear from Stargate fans, the show was not bad.
Yeah, and then at the same time, Battlestar Galactica kind of ended, from what I've heard, kind of on a whimper, from what I've heard from some people. But then they did Caprica, which was I've seen the first few episodes of that, and that was really good in my opinion. But then they like canceled it a season in or something.
Yeah, that's one of those. I never watched Battlestar Galactica when it was on, so.
Yeah, I've been catching up with it on DVD. I'll get the Blu-ray set at some point, but it's kind of a shame. Like that was kind of the height of like Sci-Fi Channel's acclaim, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that was a miniseries out the same year this was written, and so I'm wondering.
2003, actually, so no, a couple of years earlier.
Oh, it was a couple of years earlier?
Yeah, it started in 2003, and then I think it went to main series around 2004, 2005. I can look that up.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if they went, should we spend money on the thing, or should we make our hit into a TV show?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, the plan with Battlestar Galactica is that it was always meant they were going to do a television series with it. They just gave it a soft launch with this, epic miniseries, 2-part miniseries, which is just one TV movie. Yep, yeah. Miniseries 2003, then the main show came on in 2004.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because my memories and my concept of the passage of time are spotty at best.
Mm-hmm.
But no, this actually would have been like a cool thing to see, especially if Darabont had directed it.
Yeah, and we talked about this earlier, but it would have been interesting to see if he would have used the same crew that he ended up using on The Mist. For those who don't know, he was a fan of the television show The Shield, which is probably one of the best cop shows of all time. And to test out his ability to direct on a very short schedule and budget, he was able to direct an episode of The Shield, and then he used some of those actors and crew for The Mist.
Yep. Yeah, but it would be interesting to see if he would have done it, and I mean, they probably would not have had too much trouble getting people to tune into this thing, because if my memories are correct, Sci-Fi Channel played the thing like every other week in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I think my first time watching it was on Encore, so I didn't see the TV cut first. I did remember watching the TV cut, though, at one point when it aired.
I know I saw part of it on TV, and then I just went, okay, I'm just going to rent the actual movie now.
Yeah, for those who don't know, you can actually get the TV cut on Blu-ray. But it's like a lower quality version than what I remember watching in 2006.
Surprisingly, you're starting to get a lot of TV cuts of movies on home video, because you get both TV cuts of Halloween and Halloween 2. You got one of Superman the movie.
Yeah.
Like, suddenly that's becoming like a thing.
Well, the one for Halloween is just at least on that limited edition box set when they did it again. It's still the feature-length movie. It's just now the TV cutscenes are inserted into it.
Yeah.
Which I prefer than just getting a TV cut of a movie. But I think the most famous example for that, though, would be Waterworld. Oh, yeah,
Waterworld. Yeah, the Sci-Fi Channel version of that movie is, like, legendary almost.
Yeah, now it's given an official director's cut release.
It was a fan edit release that Arrow put out. I hope the guy who did the fan edit got a cut of that.
Well, didn't some of the thing happen with Raising Cain?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think Brian De Palma liked it so much that he ended up just saying, "Oh yeah, this is my director's cut."
I hope that guy got some money from it too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that covers this pretty well.
Yeah, no, like I said earlier, just tighten up that continuity a little. Maybe expand on some of the characters here and there. I don't know if it had enough character development for me, but it was serviceable nonetheless.
Or maybe you could maybe trim a couple characters too.
Perhaps.
I mean, you could easily trim like a couple of the guys who are named, like you could cut Harold out of this thing and just make him random guy number 3.
True.
Like, that would be like the first thing to do if you like, cause I mean, like I said during part 1, you could condense this down into like a feature-length film without too much effort.
Yeah, and so it would have been interesting to see how this would have been made. I don't know what they would have done with the special effects at the time, if they would have gone all out for it or what.
Yeah, it's hard to say, because I mean, Sci-Fi Channel did have some decent CG here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows what they would have actually done. Yeah,
and there was also, I'd say, like, their weird choices kind of started with how they handled both Tremors, the series, and Farscape.
Yeah, didn't they just randomly cancel Farscape even though it was popular?
Yeah, I remember liking Farscape, and then, and a lot of people would blame Tremors, the series, for canceling Farscape, but from what I've heard, it's actually the other way around.
Yeah, I've heard actually good things about Tremors, the series.
Yeah, and hopefully that other series finally gets released. I don't know when.
The one Kevin Bacon made a pilot for?
Yeah.
I think Universal is just content to make shitty direct-to-video movies until the end of time.
Yeah. Although the Chucky movies have been good.
Although that's going to Sci-Fi Channel now. So.
Yeah. Well, anyway, where can they find you?
Oh, yeah. Let me. Oh, wait, I wanted to. I'll say one more thing. The irony that Battlestar Galactica was the big success for Sci-Fi Channel. This didn't happen when Ronald D. Moore ended up writing the first draft of the prequel.
Yeah, and then ended up not taking any credit for.
And it's interesting that David Leslie Johnson is attached to a new Elm Street remake, when the Elm Street remake, one of the writers was the guy who was credited for the Thing prequel.
Yep, and let's not forget that Darabont co-wrote Dream Warriors.
Yeah, that is true. Mm-hmm. So yeah, all Elm Street connections everywhere.
Yep.
But, I'm gonna do, cause I actually forgot to do my usual plugs at the beginning of the episode, so I'm gonna get these out of the way real quick. If you want to, check out a show with similar, subject matter, you can, check out the Shelved podcast. If you want to listen to people do actual, fully produced, like, reads of unproduced scripts, you can check out the Table Reads podcast. And as usual, you can contact us at screenplayarchaeology@outlook.com, and you can go to, Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter. And the show is also it's on iTunes or whatever Apple ends up replacing iTunes with. I'm assuming it's all just gonna get transferred over. It's on Stitcher Radio, it's on Spotify, and it's on Google Play Music, and I still haven't heard back from Pandora, the fucks. But yeah, you can check us out on all those different platforms. So, you want to add anything to the sign off? I'm
not sure if I have anything to add at the moment. I guess, other than that, I'll be on in a couple of episodes, from now.
For whatever the Halloween episode is.
Yep, and I guess in the future we're planning one on Freddy's Dead in the near future.
Yeah, you wanted to do Elm Street 6.
Yeah, so we'll see what we do with that.
So yeah, you'll just be like the Halloween guy every year.
I don't mind. I've been at my college, I was the guy who dressed up as Michael and scared a lot of people.
You'll just be you're like Michael Myers. Just go to sleep as soon as November 1st hits, and you wake up a year later, and there's like a hobo looking at you, and it's like, what the fuck?
Oh, speaking of hobo Michael Myers, we might get into one of those scripts.
Oh, yeah, that is true. That's for the future, though. So yeah,
let's just say this, people: don't blame Rob Zombie for hobo Michael Myers.
Not entirely.
Yep, he wasn't the first one to have that idea.
Far from it. But yeah, that's for the future. Thank you everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. And until next time, bye.
Bye.